Hey, don't skip this intro. I've got a special announcement about how you can watch episode 1 of the WildFed TV show for free. But first, episode 21 of the WildFed podcast, Becoming a Modern-Day Hunter-Gatherer with Arthur Haines, is brought to you by Surthrival. Now is definitely the time to fortify your immune system with scientifically validated nutrients, functional foods, and herbal medicines that give you confidence and peace of mind. Colostrum is one of Surthrival's flagship products, and it's an antiviral functional food I use daily in my morning blended drinks. There's a study hosted on PubMed called Prevention of Influenza Episodes with Colostrum compared with vaccination in healthy and high-risk cardiovascular subjects. The following is from the abstract, quote, "The efficacy of a 2-month treatment with oral colostrum in the prevention of flu episodes compared with anti-influenza vaccination was evaluated. Groups included healthy subjects without prophylaxis and those receiving both vaccination and colostrum. After 3 months of follow-up, the number of days with flu was 3 times higher in the non-colostrum subjects. Colostrum, both in healthy subjects and high-risk cardiovascular patients, is at least 3 times more effective than vaccination to prevent flu and is very cost-effective." Close quote. Additionally, check out Surthrival's other immune-building formulas, like their D3K2, that's vitamin D3 sourced from lanolin, and vitamin K2 from Japanese natto. Also, have a look at the reishi and chaga dual-extracted medicinal mushroom formulas. Both of these mushrooms have demonstrated antiviral activity. We are working very hard to keep the inventory up and our shipping in place. There is a very high demand for these products right now, and it's getting very hard to predict how long we'll be able to sustain that inventory, so please don't wait. Check out the lineup at surthrival.com. In support of the nearly worldwide and ubiquitous self-quarantines we've been seeing, we've made episode 1 of the WildFed TV show free for you to watch. Go over to wild-fed.com to check out episode 1 on the river floodplain for free. It's an episode that takes place in early May, where my wife and I harvest ostrich fern fiddleheads, Arthur Haines and I forage for wild leeks, and I'm on the hunt for 2 of Maine's wild turkeys. We bring all those ingredients back to a local chef and share a meal together as a community of friends and family. Also, if you like the episode and you want to see more, you can use the coupon code HUNKERDOWN. That's right, all one word, HUNKERDOWN. It is not case sensitive. Again, HUNKERDOWN gets you 25% off the rest of the season. Also, the same coupon code will get you 25% off the Season 1 and Director's Cut's bundle package. We've made a Director's Cut for each of the 8 episodes, where we go through not just what you're seeing in that show, but the gear, tactics, and strategies that we use too. The Director's Cuts alone are an additional 14 hours of content. WildFed is now streaming on Vimeo, so you can purchase individual episodes in addition to the complete season. Again, go over to wild-fed.com to check that out. I'm Daniel Vitalis, and you're listening to the WildFed podcast, a show about reconnecting with nature through hunting, fishing, foraging, and food. WildFed. Food is all around you. Today's episode is with Arthur Haines, who, in addition to being an extremely accomplished botanist, is also a very well-rounded modern-day hunter-gatherer. He's been my foraging mentor for a decade, and the conversations we have here about wild foods, both philosophical and practical, are often very instructive. This one is no different, and as I've listened back through it, I've grown more and more excited about sharing it with you. Now, we talk about getting started foraging, choosing weapons for hunting, archery versus firearms, developing marksmanship, and getting away from lead ammunition. But first, a couple of thoughts I wanted to add. Since this conversation, I've switched my rifle rounds over to all copper bullets. Arthur's been nudging me in that direction for some time, but I've finally taken the steps to get there, and you'll hear us talk all about that in the following interview. Also, I mentioned a waterfowl identification guide called the LeMaster Method. I have since laminated mine, and it was well worth the time it took, and you'll understand what I'm talking about when you get to that part of the conversation. Lastly, I want to share a few thoughts on the impacts that the novel coronavirus is having on our culture and how it relates to wild food in the modern hunting and gathering lifestyle. This week has seen a rapid descent into a shocking new reality, one that many of us were not mentally, emotionally, physically, or spiritually prepared for. I've been into self-reliance and preparedness for some time, so while I found this very difficult to process, I have a lot of confidence about the future that comes from preparedness. That said, it has been fascinating to see store shelves cleaned out. No toilet paper, no ammunition, and in many cases, very little food. Now, during all of it, I've also been collecting maple sap and cooking it down to maple syrup. So it's been fascinating to see this juxtaposition. The social world, the world of human interactions and economics, has been melting down. Meanwhile, in nature, everything is proceeding as usual. Spring has not been postponed. Maple sap flow is not canceled. This week, I cooked off enough sugar for my entire year's use. There are no wild food shortages. Those shelves are stocked, so to speak. While we're not 100% food self-sufficient, not even close, we have the ability to feed ourselves with very little external inputs if we need to. That's not the primary reason I pursue wild foods, of course, but the self-reliance and survival aspect of this lifestyle are hard not to highlight right now. I spend a lot of time explaining to people why I hunt and gather. I steer very clear of because society could break down at any minute type of attitudes. I don't think that's helpful, and it's not the spirit in which I want to pursue wild foods. That said, it's always there in the back of my mind. It soothes the what-if questions that swirl in the heads of those who understand the precariousness of global supply chains and the house of cards that is the worldwide post-industrial lifestyle. So while I prefer to talk about learning your landscape, developing relationships with species where you live, and the incredible nutritional density of wild foods, I would be a bit remiss not to mention the fact that it makes you very anti-fragile in events like these. Seeing people around me become concerned about having enough food to eat is a reminder that hunting and gathering makes you extremely fit for these kind of crises. It doesn't make you immune to them, but it certainly helps to disaster-proof you, and it makes you an incredible asset to your community. So while people huddle up in their homes, socially distancing themselves, we'll still be hunting, fishing, and foraging. We can still do that responsibly without concern for spreading this infection. I can step out my door and be immersed in the natural world where spring is unfolding as it always does, even if, at the same time, the society around us is in chaos. These two worlds exist simultaneously side by side. In some ways, I'm looking forward to a little time off and a chance to practice a bit more of what I preach. So with that, I'm wishing you all robust health, confidence, and level heads as this still fluid situation continues to unfold across the world. Things will get challenging, and it's on each of us to rise to the occasion. Just don't say, Daniel, if it gets real bad, I'm coming to your house, because I'm getting sick of hearing that. Now, enjoy this interview, and Avani and I are sending prayers to each and every one of you. Thank you so much for your listenership. Arthur Haines, thanks for stopping by the house today.
I always laugh because it's so much fun being here that there's no work. I'll come from anywhere, and I'm really thankful that you always invite me to be here. So it always seems funny when you thank me because I'm always getting ready to try to thank you for having me be a participant in this whole thing.
Well, you continue to be one of the most sort of celebrated guests when we get feedback from people. And when I started this new show, it was like, well, I just really hope you keep having Arthur on. So
cool.
So this is an audience that really likes hearing from you. And you and I, we just haven't had, life's been busy, huh? Haven't really been able to see you so often. So part of me wishes we could have had the recording rolling when we were talking the last few minutes, because whenever I catch up with you, there's like a flurry of stuff going back and forth. But I'm really excited to chat with you today a little bit as sort of a follow-up to a podcast I did recently called Finding Your Niche. And I thought the whole time I was recording it, I kept thinking, it'd be neat to have Arthur sort of chime in on some of this. So that podcast was all about getting started, hunting, fishing, foraging, trapping, any of these activities that help us to yield wild food and simultaneously build relationships to our landscape. And you're really familiar with those barriers to entry too, I'm sure in your own life, but also in a lot of the students that you work with. And you're somebody I point a lot of people to who are interested in going deeper on foraging because of the great workshops you lead. So I know that you see a lot of students come through who are just trying to figure this stuff out as well. So I guess I'll pass it over to you and just sort of see your thoughts on how people get started in this lifestyle, which is so rewarding. But actually, let me add one caveat, which I'm known to do. Judy, who I can't think of her last name off the top of my head, who's the new commissioner for inland fish and wildlife in the state we live in, Camuso. She did a podcast recently where she said if she had talked about a story of going hunting for the first time. She went turkey hunting. And so she's in charge of course, all of the field biological work going on in the state, but also in charge of all of the law enforcement side, the wardens and everybody as well, and basically oversees the sort of development of legislation for hunting, fishing, and trapping in the state. And she said, wow, if it's hard for me to figure out how to get started when I have those resources at my hands,
Right.
how hard is it for people who don't? And that really resonated with me. So what's your sort of background in hunting, fishing, foraging, trapping, stuff like that? And how do you see people getting involved?
I mean, I'm really lucky because I grew up in a rural part of Western Maine where hunting, fishing, trapping, and limited foraging for a few of the things where the tradition was still intact, like fiddleheads, the ostrich fern fiddleheads. I got a chance to do all that with friends, family, my friend's father who would take me out, who had me shooting a shotgun for the first time. That was sort of going on all around you all the time. And while you weren't necessarily doing every aspect of hunting and gathering, there was a lot of it that was available to you. Not to mention, as a kid, I hunted everything that was possible with an air rifle. I mean, that was ongoing regardless of season.
Yeah.
I was known to the wardens, to many older people who saw me stalking at their bird feeders. This is what kept me alive and sane, given sort of the household that I grew up in.
Okay, right. I recently was talking to somebody. It was a Boston Globe article, and sometimes you don't realize what a reporter is going to actually write. You think maybe something's off, nothing's off the record, right? But the quote was something from me about how food was a way to kind of shape my destiny because of growing up around a traumatic home and a broken family. And, was it similar for you in that you could sort of use these activities as a way to find solace in nature or just, solitude?
Absolutely. I don't want to make out that I had this absolutely terrible upbringing, but there were aspects of my childhood that I won't go into here that it was often better for me to not be in the home.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And because of that, I was outside all the time. And that meant that while I was in the forests, on the hills, along the riverbanks, it just made sense to be doing something with your time, and hunting and fishing were those kinds of things. And I have no idea what my sanity would be had I had not all that time in nature, that, awe-inspiring, low-stress environment that would allow you to endure the other extremely stressful aspects of your life. Those are those sort of nutritional components of hunting and gathering that many people don't talk about. We just go right to the micronutrients.
Yeah.
And
I mean the experiential stuff.
Yeah, I'd be a nut job.
Sometimes I imagine like for you, with the kind of brain that you have, if you hadn't gotten interested in the natural world, it's kind of scary where, you could have ended up as like a, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know what, like a nuclear missile engineer or some kind of weird thing, that,
oh my God, that would have been so horrible.
Yeah, it's terrible to think about. One question I have for you is, you've told me a lot about some of your sort of childhood friend group, right? A tight couple of guys that you were friends with. And one of them is who I've never met after all these years, but hear you talk about a lot. He did a lot of the outdoor stuff with you, but didn't hunt. Is that correct?
That's right.
Can you describe this is somebody who you're still friends with.
Mm-hmm.
I know you respect a lot, but you had a divergence there as friends as kids. And it sounds like, even though you were into it, like that kind of peer-to-peer pressure didn't really influence his decision-making. What's the difference in thinking that led you to decide that you were going to hunt and for him to kind of enjoy the outdoors but take another path?
It's always been a mystery to me, really. This person had an ethic, a sense, a heart-based sense that it just didn't feel right to this person. But at the same time, I think the biggest part of it was because it wasn't being done in the way that he would have liked to have done it. As teenagers, we didn't have someone who could take us through the harvest of a tree to, say, build our own wooden bow that we might take a deer with. It was always firearms or whatever that this person just wanted nothing to do with. Mm-hmm. And so my hypothesis with this particular friend, of the two that I spent, Chad and Ken, some people will know those names and others won't, but these two folks, I've often thought it was the manner in which people hunted for him, rather than the fact that hunting in and of itself was bad. And if he could have done it on his own hunter-gatherer terms...
If he had the Wayback Machine and he could go back in time...
Then it would have been completely different, I believe.
That's really interesting, because it's a bit of a divergence from what we're talking about, but maybe not really. This is something that is coming up right now with a group of students I'm working with. It's a conversation that comes up. How some people feel sort of turned off by modern equipment, modern tactics, and then I think too the modern hunting culture, and they are drawn to a world that is kind of not really here anymore, and wish that it was, and if it was, they would want to participate in it. But the way it exists now, you know, they have this nostalgia from another time. The real famous big game hunter, I guess generalist hunter, Steve Rinella, said this thing one time, and it really stuck with me, and I think it's relevant here. He said something about something about growing up as kids wanting to play cowboys and Indians, and that there was a certain type of kid who wanted to play Indian and a certain type of kid who wanted to play cowboy. And he said in his experience, the people that wanted to play Indians didn't turn into very good hunters. And that's, I would like to tease that apart a little bit here, because I think it sounds like one thing, but as we tease it apart, it's more nuanced. But do you kind of get what I'm saying
completely.
There? Okay. So you have a pretty strong background in the primitive skills world, and I think a lot of the people in that world fall into that camp. Mm-hmm. They want to make stone tools, they want to make their own bows and their own bowstring even, and they want to tan hides and do a lot of tracking, and they develop out this almost like Pleistocene skill set, right? Yeah. But then they very often are buying their food at the grocery store. So there's this or the farmer's market, or they work on an organic farm or whatever it is. But they often don't really put a lot of the time into hunting. But they have a skill set that I think if I had that skill set,
I understand.
You know, I would utilize that to do this. So it's strange to me, like how you can develop a hunter-gatherer skill set, but not necessarily hunt and gather. And then, as you've seen, there's a lot of people in the modern hunting world who lack not just those skills, but actually don't even know that those skills. Case in point, you being asked at the archery shop with the stone point if that stone point would kill a deer, and we've laughed about that so many times over the years.
Yeah, I went in to have it weighed so that I could try to...
Oh, you wanted a grain weight on it?
Yeah, just so I could try to make some comparisons to modern equipment. And I walk in with this stone point that I had made.
So a napped stone arrowhead, basically, that you would have to an arrow.
One of the folks that were there, he was a hunter of pulley bows, wheel bows, compound bows, whatever name you want to apply to this weapon. And he asks if he can look at it, and I hand it to him, and he turns and looks to the owner of the shop, and he's like, "Do you think that would kill a deer?" And it's amazing to think, like, you don't even know your evolutionary history.
Yeah.
Like, you wouldn't be here without that.
Where do you think we started exactly?
I do.
That'd kill a mammoth.
Yeah. It's so strange to me that, you know how we're so divisive in our world right now, and it's almost like we have to do one or the other, and we can't do both.
Yep.
Right? Like, I'm in all. I mean, everyone knows this about me. Hunting with a wooden bow and stone tip arrow, I regard as a high caliber, a high form, if you will, of hunting. It's best form for me for what I'm trying to do. But that doesn't mean I'm not going to hunt with a rifle. Mm-hmm. I'm going to do both while I learn the ecology of my place, right. While I learn how to get closer and closer to animals, while I learn to read those tracks better. So that, the tracking is all about trying to intercept the animal, to figure out where it is, when it is, so that you can be there at the same time with a weapon capable of taking this animal's life. And it's like you can work on both at the same time. You can pull in all of the experience that you have with shotguns and rifles into your bow hunting with whatever bow you choose to use. I'm not sure why people get so one side or the other, because I've spent lots of time hunting with a wooden bow and going
not
nowhere,
anything,
right?
Yeah.
But that was all valuable too.
Right.
Like with hunting, negative information can be
extremely valuable,
right? Because you're learning in some cases this doesn't work. They're not here. And if you're thinking, why aren't the animals here now? Well, you're learning that, they're not coming through at this time of day. Or in fact, they were coming through in the summer season, but they're on the ridges now.
Yeah.
Those kinds of things. So if you're paying attention, negative information is still useful. But at the same time, we still want to have some successes, because there's also skills to butchering animals. Remember the first deer that you ever butchered? I remember mine. I guess I cut it here.
Yeah.
What's all that white film material all over the muscles? Do I eat that? Well, you come to learn those, connective tissues that you'd like to remove to an extent, or at least grind up. And there's all these things, like you still need to learn how to do that too.
Yeah.
So do both, or neither, whatever.
Yeah, this is interesting. I want to kind of finish the thought too, because you just sort of gave the solution, which is kind of where we were going anyway. But I think that you've got a lot of people in the hunting world who are extremely successful hunters without very much ecological knowledge. They may know the species they're after somewhat well, and then you end up having to learn some of the food sources, and so you end up learning some other species as well. But not at that level that we were talking about before. You get the primitive skills folks who understand so much more, know so many more species, how to utilize those species, about different ecotones and ecotypes, all this kind of stuff. And then they often aren't that successful. And then you look at the people who are really filling bag limits all the time, and you go like, well, they don't even know that stuff. How is that possible? So, but using modern equipment and modern strategies.
Right.
But then another thing I want to point out about this conversation, because I think it's really fascinating. I kind of started off wanting to I hate to say play Indian, because I feel like it's not a politically correct thing, but
I do know what you
I'm
mean.
saying.
Yes.
So I wanted to do that more, and then I found myself more, I think, like I'm kind of in between, but more on that cowboy side, in the sense that I use modern weapons and modern tactics and modern equipment. But that's because, for me, here's how I see it. One way is like, we were just talking about a book I'm reading right now, First Peoples in a New World. And just thinking about those first people who came into Pleistocene North America with this menagerie of animals, and a density of wildlife that's kind of staggering to think about. I personally imagine that with the equipment that you had available then, you were not so disadvantaged because of the open tracts of land, because of the lack of laws, and there's no real sense of hunting ethics at the time, right? That's sort of a modern thing. Animals.
Yeah, no shooting ducks unless they're in the air.
Yeah, it ends. Yeah, or like it ends at sunset. You cannot hunt after sunset. It's Sunday. You cannot hunt. Right, exactly. Or you don't fill a bag limit. Exactly, right. And from what I understand from the archaeological record, it was pretty common to target a pregnant female, for instance. Whereas today that would be seen as unethical by a lot of modern hunters. So you don't have any of those encumbrances. And at that time, just about anything you did was sustainable. And you could take your equipment and just leave it on the ground. And as we know, this stuff's really hard to find today. It doesn't last that long.
That's right.
Right? So you just didn't have any of those issues. Today, we're dealing with land parceled up, private ownership, federal regulation, state regulation. We're dealing with incredible amounts of pressure at a time that some have called the sixth extinction. Species numbers are way down, just about on almost every species we're chasing, so to speak. We're dealing with environmental pollution. We're dealing with 40-hour work weeks and all this stuff. It's like when I go out in the field, I feel like I need to be successful. So I was like, well, I'll start off with what gives me the most advantage, and I'd rather work my way backward than try to start with a significant handicap, in the sense of, let's say, like a wooden bow. You just
Hunting is exponentially harder as the range of your weapon decreases. I mean, it's not...
and your ability to accurately target with a sighting system.
It's not linear. It's ridiculously harder to get to, say, a deer that's 50 yards away, and then to get 25 yards. It just got a lot harder.
Exponentially, like
now
you said,
to get to 15 yards, it's ridiculously hard.
Yeah.
And those are the things that weigh in. Like, we don't have magnified optics on a wooden bow. We don't have sighting systems, sophisticated. What's the word I'm looking for, Daniel? We can adjustable sighting systems
for elevation and windage.
We don't have those things, and it gets a lot harder. So I still am in this boat of don't not consider them as viable. They may be the most environmentally conscientious hunting weapons that exist, but you still need to learn all the other things about, like we talked about, the butchering, and the cooking and the food preservation. And if you don't have any success, you can't learn those either.
Yep, good point. Yeah, and why are you out there? And except probably to get food. So if you're not having success, then it seems like a bit of a... I've used the term Renaissance fair a lot, and I don't mean it to... I'm not meaning it to be critical, because I feel like in addition to those being really ecologically sustainable hunting methods, I feel like they must be kept alive. That's like so strong in my heart. It's like they must not be lost. However, I find like using modern equipment and techniques, which I have a lot of challenges with, especially with some of the manufactured equipment. I mean, it's just like, for instance, you and I have been talking about decoys a lot lately. Like, my goodness, just the volume of space that they take up. It's not their mass, it's their volume, right? They're hollow, but they're not collapsible if you want really good ones.
All the really nice ones do not fold up and get put away.
Right? Yeah. I have 3 turkey decoys, which is not a huge number, but they take up a lot of space.
But they need their own room.
They need their own room. Like, they would fill the average Honda Civic's trunk, let's say, right? They would fill it, and that would be all you're putting in there is these 3 turkey decoys. So some part of my life is encumbered by storing these turkey decoys. So what if I just got those crow decoys recently. It's like a whole nother chunk of space. Geese, ducks, sea ducks versus puddle ducks. Like, how many decoys? Like, where does all this stuff go? And I'm like filling up with equipment. And so I see how nostalgic it is, the idea of just kind of going out there with stuff I made from the landscape. But I also think, can you speak to this for a second? I think people don't understand how much equipment was in the Stone Age toolkit.
Oh, that was huge
Quite
too.
a lot of stuff, right?
The difference is, and I talk about this with my wife a lot, we have a lot of stuff, right? There's stuff, and it fills up the small house that we have, and then there's the communal house where we store some things, particularly community things, like our maple syruping equipment and our ricing equipment. But some of the hunting equipment I keep, to myself, because it's extremely expensive, for one, and you don't want that just being loaned out to anybody.
And precision tools too. You don't want banged around.
Exactly. Yeah, thank you. And what used to happen is all of these activities might have been part of this annual migration cycle that was done. And so when you got to the sugaring grove of maples, your equipment was there, and you may have made some from the previous year and stored it there. You didn't have to store it in your house. And then as you went on to this particular site, there was your ricing gear, and here was, moose hunting, and here was deer hunting, and here was this foraging. And all of that gear didn't have to get stored in one space because they weren't sedentary. They had this entire river drainage, or sometimes multiple river drainages, that they traveled through as part of their seasonal migrations. We're sedentary, as you mentioned, with the private property laws and things of that nature. We don't get to do not a literal migration anymore, although we definitely do a figurative migration as we go to different sites. But we kind of have to go back to our house.
With all our stuff.
And we have to store it there.
Where you own your land and I own my land.
Yeah.
You stay off that land, damn it.
And because of that, now it all stacks up.
Yeah.
And just based on the way they lived, hunter-gatherers didn't have to worry about those kinds of things. So, now it's like, hey, you got this part of a room that's completely filled with stuff, hunting gear, fishing gear, and the like, but it's it's not because everyone's into mass consumerism. Part of it is because our sedentary lifestyle forces us to put it all in one place.
I think another thing that can be, so that's, I think, for people who've come into hunting from having been, not from a hunting family, not from a hunting culture. Maybe they were vegetarians. Maybe they, like myself, maybe they were opposed to the idea of hunting, and through food they found themselves come back around to it. Mm-hmm. These are things that like go through. I think of like we were sitting down right now and we had your classic sort of hunter here with us, classic modern hunter. They'd be like, "What are you guys talking about?" This whole conversation we just had might be like, "Why are you even? What is that even about?" But that is going through the heads of a lot of the people who are coming into hunting today. Another component of it would be that you're entering into what could be described as a very complex maze of legal structures. Mm-hmm. If you want to start hunting, and it can be kind of overwhelming, right? So you and I have navigated that. We did our guides license tests recently, and that required us to be pretty up on top of just about all of
at least our panel of peers says that we have navigated.
Yeah, exactly. But it was, what really struck me was how the sort of lack of simplicity. So it's like, well, they publish a book. Well, they publish a book every year for the hunting laws, but they also publish a book every year of the fishing laws. And then they publish a book every year of the trapping laws. And then, you're going to fish on the ocean? Well, you need to go to DMR and get the marine laws, which is a whole nother thing, which they don't produce a book for, which I got to print out off the internet to check.
And don't forget the boating regulations.
Then you got the boating regulations. That's a whole nother book, right? And that's not looking at, you were saying before, like you need to learn butchering skills, right? But you also, there's a lot more to it, right? There's a lot of skills that people need to pick up along the way. Marksmanship skills, no matter what weapon system they're using, all that kind of stuff, ballistics and all of that. It's very complicated stuff. And that's like before you even get through the law stuff. So then it's like, well, even to access any of this, you got to do a hunter safety class and maybe a trapping safety class. And I find it could be really overwhelming. And that's just one state, right?
Yeah. And for me, though, I want to mention something that you have done many times. When I came into foraging, as I mentioned, in my childhood, we foraged, but we foraged for, a selection of things. It wasn't the range of things that I foraged for as an adult. But when I really sort of came back to foraging as something that I wanted to do, not for survival skills when the plane crashed, but as a part of your life, I didn't have the obstacle of trying to learn the plants or trying to remember all of them. I was a professional botanist. I worked as a botanist. And so it never even occurred to me that it could be overwhelming.
Oh, my goodness.
Right? And
oh, my goodness.
You were the one who I first heard say, and I still think it is the best advice today, don't look at the plant kingdom. I've got to master it, right? Because it's never going to happen. I won't ever do that, and this is my job. But you took each plant as its own skill. I'm going to learn about, I'll use the example again of the ostrich fern fiddlehead. There's an ecology. Where are they? Where do they grow? What are the habitats they grow in? A phenology, the timing that I go there. And then there's the sustainable interaction. How do I pick them? And then when we bring them home, there's a set of other skills. And you just broke it down. Just do that one. Don't worry about the others. Don't let it overwhelm you. Don't lay awake at night thinking about these 62 other plants. Just do that one. Mm-hmm. And you're going to make a big impact on your life. And when you go to the next plant, there's holdover. If you happen to be gathering another shoot that's undergoing this rapid meristematic growth, we still use the bend test when we go to pick those. There's holdover, but just treat it as another.
Tell people what that means, bend test, just because I think. What's he mean?
Yeah, we do it with asparagus, right? Go, yeah. You don't cut the asparagus to length. You bend it, and the point at which everything has become, more rigid cells that are really fibrous, and the point at which it's still flexible, it shows you where that is.
By breaking.
Yeah, that's the bend test. And we use that when we harvest things like ostrich fern fiddleheads and a number of other shoots from the wild when we forage. And so there are overlapping skills, which is nice, but just take each one and do the exact same thing with hunting and fishing. Don't go, I've got to learn all these things. Right now I'm going to focus on gray squirrels. I can much more, for example, I can much more easily learn the laws around gray squirrels, figure out the types of forests that they like to grow in, because it's limited. It's not everywhere, right? And then I can figure out a weapon that I want to use for those, which may be a weapon you can use for a whole suite of species. Again, there's overlap, but focus first on this one animal, become a good marksman with that particular weapon, and it's so much less overwhelming. I just thought it was a great approach. I mean, you developed it, and now I start to use it.
I don't think I developed
it,
but
it was the first time I had heard it, so I credit you.
I'm a huge fan of the monograph. For me,
yeah.
And it's even if you look at my library, and you've seen over the years, I doff books pretty regularly, but the books that stick around, a lot of them are monographs. It'll be a book about bluefin tuna, a book about turkeys. It'll be a book about a specific plant or a specific.
Have they written a book about lake whitefish?
I'm still looking. It's funny though, because I'm constantly, if you look at my Amazon or my Audible search history, like the other day, I am just every keyword I can, trying to find a book about wild hogs on Audible for this drive I'm going on and to go hog hunting. Because a lot of times what I'll do is on the way to a production, like if we're going to go after certain species, on the way, we went to do an episode of WildFed about apples recently. And the whole drive, Grant and I just listened to podcasts about apples.
Well, you're preparing. Because
mentally absorbing as much as I can, though.
When they start speaking information that's really useful to your particular guest, if you've already read something about it, it becomes much easier to file it away because you've started to develop
a neural pathway.
This structure of how to store information on
around
apples.
That species.
And if you didn't have that at all, it would just be new information that you're trying to figure out, where does that piece go versus this? What drawer do I put that in the brain?
Mental filing cabinet. Yeah. So that's what I like about your ancestral plants books, because they are, each page or 2 pages is like a monograph on a specific
a little short
topic.
monograph, right?
I like Sam's books because they're like that. It's just a chapter on that species. So I do approach it like that. I approach a lot of adult learning like that, one species at a time, because, like learning about apples was easy, but learning about the botany of the rose family would be overwhelming. It falls in there, but it would be overwhelming. It's a lot of species.
And some of the most taxonomically challenging to ID in the world.
At my age, and with all the work that I have in my life, and my bills and my relationships and my family and all the things that I need to maintain, I don't have the mental space that I had when I was 15, 16, 17, 18 to learn like I could. At the time, I think I can probably learn just as well, and I know a lot more today, but my life is filled up with lots of stuff. So, this method we're talking about is fantastic for adult onset learning, but I see the limitations when I look at how you view botany, because you see it, you understand things from a bigger picture perspective. So it leaves a lot of holes in my learning, but it gets me effective.
But there's something that should be said, and that's for anybody listening to this podcast. I just want people to realize the method that you use works, because I have seen it happen over and over again, where you have gone from essentially zero understanding of a particular animal or whatever to, within a couple of years, which is a really short period of time, reaching a competency where you can hang with the experienced people. The lingo's down, you're having success, you guys are talking about funny stories, like they almost believe that you've been doing
it my whole life.
Yes.
And so sometimes you get caught, but
but and we both know that, because there's both topics that you and I have embarked on later, and there will just be something that I didn't know that could happen. Bow hunting bears with dogs. I never even thought that I could wound the dog with the broadhead.
Yeah.
It was a hole.
Never occurred to me either.
And now I know. There are precautions that need to be taken with the orientation of the arrow and so forth. It'll never happen again. But those are the there's always little holes, but you reach base level competency really quickly. And I'm just passing on. I've watched it happen multiple times, And I think it's an approach that other people can use. While I think there's also some unique things about you personally, I think that the method works.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and often it's like less than a few years. I mean, sometimes in a season, if you're really diligent, you can pick up 80% of the baseline information, and then the
now
next
you need
few
10
years,
or 15 years to get there.
And those are those key things you were talking about, because
Right.
sometimes you make a mistake in something that you're amongst very experienced people, and they're looking at like, how could you not know that?
It's like, this is only my second season.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, there was one thing that you mentioned in that circle about, I think we're talking about the hunting culture. And I do think one of the obstacles for certain people is a certain kind of hunter that they have either interacted with, that they have seen on TV, and it's a turnoff, right? And they have to understand that the entire hunting culture is filled with a whole range of personalities. And all of them have a place, and all of them have expertise to share. But yes, some people that shoot a deer, for example, are not going to stop and do a particular ceremony to honor the animal, let's say. But you can do that. Just because there's something about hunting that you don't like, it doesn't mean that you need to not hunt. Be the hunter that you want to be, and you don't have to follow everyone else's lead. I'm trying to...
Oh, yeah, you're making perfect sense to
Good,
me.
good.
I want to add to it. Part of it, like, there's been a lot of cultural influence. I think, like, characters like Elmer Fudd have done intentionally did such a disservice. But then at the same time, I meet people that fit that caricature from time to time. I meet hunters that I
They're
find
rare, but they
I find their I don't know what the word is. It's not their ethics. It's just their worldview sometimes. I can find a little reprehensible. But then I meet people like that in a lot of walks of life. However, I meet less foragers that I find have a reprehensible worldview. But I have met some, and occasionally bump into some. So part of that is just people in general. But then, yeah, hunting does have that component. Now, here's one of the things that I found has been a significant barrier to entry to a lot of people that I've spoken to through social media who are like trying to get started, and they'll hear me talking about finding mentors. Because another thing, so you were sort of talking about that, I guess we'll call it the monograph approach to learning. That is a big component, but another thing that I do is I find somebody to teach me.
It's key.
But I don't always find, let's say that I'm, like recently I was watching Joe Rogan was pistol shooting and carbine shooting, 3-gun style, with Terran Tactical, who trained Keanu Reeves for those John Wick movies and stuff.
Right.
They're kind of like one of the best in the game. If you're Joe Rogan, it's really easy to be like, I'm going to find the best person. And you're in a place like LA where it's like easy to access the best people in the world on a thing, and just be like, or you're Tim Ferriss, let's say, he's another one who'll do that. I want to learn about freediving. I'm going to find the top freediving person in the world. Well, that's definitely a good method, but it's not accessible to a lot of people. So for me, a lot of times what I'll do is like, I'm going to find a local person. They don't even have to be somebody I like, and I will work with them to learn. And I'll make myself useful, and I'll be humble even if I don't agree with how they approach life. And that's a big barrier for a lot of people, because there's a lot of people that are too idealistic to want to do that, where it's like there's no way I can learn from that person.
They still have ecological knowledge that you need, and there are things that you can share back and forth with each other. And the fact is like, if you don't like this person, or you feel that they have a terrible worldview, how is it ever going to change without polite and gradual exposure to somebody who views things differently?
Yeah.
So, but you've done that really well. And in fact, I am an advocate, and I'm sure that you would offer the same advice. Pay for the instruction if you can.
Yeah.
Because your competency will skyrocket compared to just fumbling through the years. If you have the ability to pay for instruction, I don't care what's it, foraging, fishing, hunting, it's worth it.
Shooting.
Especially shooting.
Yeah. That's a big component for me.
It's not just pull the trigger.
There's so much to it. And I was trying to explain, I was talking to Ivani about it the other day, because I was going sea duck hunting, and I was saying, man, these ducks fly at different speeds past the boat. So you are shooting the shot, which is, a bundle of pellets, like picture BBs. If you're not familiar with how shotguns work, it's like shooting a cloud of BBs.
Right.
Okay, so depending on the choke that I install on the end of the shotgun, that pellet spread is wider or narrower at any given distance. And then the birds are flying at a distance which I have to mentally sort of calculate in the moment. Then I need to shoot those pellets out in front where the bird will end up when the pellets transect it.
Yes.
But the pellets don't go in a straight line like a laser beam. They're in a ballistic arc. And they drop off. So you're underhand throwing a softball with a ballistic arc at a speed that you can't control, but at a density that you can control to try to intersect something you can't control at a speed that you don't know what it is. Like, it's a lot of on a boat that's moving on the water.
It was the best description ever.
It's complicated, I think a person who's never shot, well, also when you hear...
That's why you start with things like gray squirrels with the shotgun, to understand how the shotgun works, and then you go to these waterfowl.
And I would also recommend you take an X-Acto knife to a shotgun cartridge and open it up and even see what's in there, because a lot of times it's such a mystery to people. And then... I want to say, too, that I think when you hear, a legislator, let's say, who's got an agenda against guns, and you'll hear some of the commentary that they'll make publicly, as a person who's familiar with firearms, sometimes you're like, ooh, that's impossible, what you're saying. I heard recently that a 5.56 round could penetrate, I think they were saying 12 feet of concrete. It's like, nope, no, that cannot do that. So you'll hear things like that, right? It can shoot 600 rounds a minute. It's like, no, it can't do that. So anyway, you just hear like really outrageous stuff because people don't understand firearms. And one of the things I think people assume is that it's easy to hit what you're shooting at and that the bullet moves in a straight line. And it definitely does not move in a straight line. Gravity is acting upon it from the second that it leaves the muzzle. So you are lobbing a football, not pointing a laser beam.
Right.
And therefore, your bullet does not impact, where it hits at 50 yards is not where it hits at 60, 70, 80, 90, and 100 yards. You need to know all that. So, before I started hunting, you talked about growing up hunting a little bit, which I did not. But I spent several years shooting in a school, just kind of recreationally. And then when I started hunting, I was like, oh, I have a huge advantage here.
It changed everything.
It makes it so much easier to start being successful.
Marksmanship is one of the things that you have an ability to take care of, one of the obstacles before you ever go into the field.
Yeah.
And of course, there are things that happen when you're in the field, branches, weather, distance, and your excitement when the animal is in view and in range, that you can't always prepare for it. But I mean, I literally shoot my bow almost every single day of the year that I can. Either if it's too cold or it's raining or something like that, we're not shooting. But almost every other day I'm shooting. I mean, I'm still shooting. Except in the winter, it's maybe only a couple of times a week when I get those warm days.
Yep.
It's the one thing you can take care of and make sure that you're very, very good. I just feel when people go into the field and have terrible marksmanship, that should have already been taken care of. For me, because you could be wounding an animal and having it run off and have this slow death. It's not that the animal goes to waste. It just seems like a really terrible way to die. And you and I have all had this happen, and I don't forget any of them.
It also, and outside of just like how you feel about it, because it feels terrible, what also is hard is that you've put in all that work and you finally got that rare opportunity.
That's the other thing I want to mention, Daniel. You're spot on, because if you have been waiting in a stand for a deer, let's say, and you fire there, they may not come back there again that whole season. You lost your chance, and you've got to make it count. And there's the marksmanship.
Yeah, and I want to say that when you and I have discussed this a lot, if you approach it with the right mental attitude, shooting a bow, shooting a firearm, shooting a blowgun, you all of them have overlap in marksmanship skills. It almost doesn't matter what projectile you're throwing.
You wouldn't think they do, but they actually
definitely do. And you can do things like, one thing I've noticed, you're big on this with all of your weapon systems, setting them up to be similar so that you have a limited number of variables that you have to work through when you change weapons, right?
Yeah.
Like for instance, on my bow, I shoot a straight wall trigger just because I shoot straight wall triggers on some of my other firearms, and it just gives me that, like, I'm very familiar with how to press a trigger without moving anything. So I keep my bow, which I don't shoot that much, set up that same way. But everything I shoot, when I shoot my air gun, it's another opportunity to practice, because we've just made it sound like, okay, this is how complicated marksmanship is, but then I can also make it really simple. It goes a little something like this. Once you have your sight picture and your sight alignment and everything, you got your crosshairs or whatever on your target, as long as you have all your ballistics worked out, the main thing is when you press the trigger, nothing moves except the trigger to the rear.
Thank you.
You press the trigger to the rear. What I have seen with almost everybody who's struggling with marksmanship is that in anticipation of the explosion or the recoil of the bow or whatever it is, they flinch, close their eyes, turn their face away slightly, and they'll say they're not doing it, and then you film them in slow motion, and you go, look, you're doing it. So
you can watch the weapon move off target.
And the thing is that I try to tell people that your bow or your rifle or your pistol is hitting what it was aiming at when you press the trigger. The bullet is going where the crosshairs or the sights were. It's just that you moved them. So it's not like, you know what I mean?
As the saying goes,
doing it right.
Continuous application of the fundamentals before, during, and after the shot.
Yeah, exactly. Man, that's straight from Scott, our shooting teacher. And he's always like saying, it's like, look, when somebody throws a football, they don't throw the football and drop their arm immediately to their side. The arm goes out like as if it's still throwing the football. When you hit the golf ball, the swing carries on through the ball all the way to the other side.
Watch me shoot a bow. I shoot, the arrows hit the target, and I'm like a statue.
Yeah, hands still there. There's a bowling alley / food place / hangout spot, live music and everything between here and Portland. And occasionally I'll meet up with friends there. We'll do like couple stuff there and go bowling. It's so wholesome. And what I do, so because I don't know how to bowl. I don't know anything about bowling. One thing I do is I stick to this one weight. I don't even know if it's pounds or what, but it says 9 on it. I only use the 9 so I can develop consistency.
Reduce variables.
Then as I approach, there's like a line where you don't cross, right? And then there's dots there that are like give you sort of an idea of where the center of the aisle is. Other lane, I'm sorry. And then out ahead there are these like little wooden inlays that give you like a sight plane.
Right.
So what I have developed is a swing where the ball has no English. I'm not saying I'm doing this right, by the way. I'm sure bowlers are cringing, but this is what I'm doing. When I release the ball, I do it in such a way so that it will not roll to the left or the right.
Yes.
Right? So it rolls straight. And then I line up like I'm lining up the sights on a weapon. I line up all those dots down the lane, and then I line my body up so that you get where I'm going with this.
Oh, but this is the point.
I try
I
to
totally
drop
get
it
it
exactly the same every time. Now, it doesn't always work, but I hit a statistically significant number of strikes and spares that way because I don't change anything. When I am done, I look back and my friends are always laughing because I have like one hand up in the air. Like I'm doing this like really silly pose because I follow through so completely.
Yes.
Just what you were just talking about. But I always looks like I'm John Travolta in Saturday Night Live when I release the ball. But it's that same thing. So when I'm bowling, I am approaching it like a marksmanship practice session. And I believe that the same parts of my brain are lighting up.
Oh, yeah.
If that makes sense. Like I'm trying to work that same circuitry so that I'm practicing bowling. I mean, if I was throwing a paper airplane, I would be doing this because it's consistency, right?
And let's face it, paper airplanes are just as important as hunting. So I need... But I would be doing the exact same thing.
Imagine you're in that scene, you're like, what paperweight you working with?
Glossy or non-glossy?
Yeah. What kind of gloss you running? Oh man, I do think though, like some level of training is really smart in the shooting world because it's even though there's complexities inside of 100 yards, 150 yards, even 200 yards, things can be pretty simple if you've got the right gear and you you believe in it. Have you ever had the
Well,
experience?
that's especially true with when people are using a particular size of round, the bullet I'm talking about, that often gives them a hedge factor. In other words, if we're shooting at a deer with a 308, and maybe our marksmanship's not perfect and we hit 6 inches right or something, in all likelihood, deer is still down. And so that's also just a part of the whole story. As your caliber of rifle goes down for the animal, your marksmanship skill has to go up. Yeah. So but I agree.
Especially once you get down to like archery and you're killing with no hydrostatic shock.
Oh, it's just exsanguination. Period. And so I think you're very right. Inside of certain distances, it can be really simple. And so while everything that you're talking about is completely true, there's ways to conceal that complexity from somebody at first. For the more straightforward shots.
Are you familiar with what point blank range actually means? Because people will say, shot him at point blank, and they mean the gun right to the person, to the body. Right? But it actually means that in what distance. So you need your game animal. You need to know, like, okay, I'm shooting at an animal with a 9-inch diameter vital zone.
Right.
In what distance range will my bullet, when I put the crosshairs on the center of that, even if it deviates up or down based on distance, will it still be in that zone? So your point blank range might be from 0 to 150 yards.
Right.
You don't have to think about, okay, at this distance, how much bullet drop do I have and all of that.
It's still in there.
In point blank. Right. So that conceals a lot of those little things too. But yeah, I would say to somebody, stop me. I'm going to say this and then you tell me if you see it differently, because I'm really open to having another opinion on it. But I think that most people would benefit the most from a pistol shooting course, because I think if you can shoot a pistol well, you can shoot a rifle very well. But if you shoot a rifle well, there's very little translation over to shooting a pistol, because you have you're always offhand with a pistol. We're not resting the pistol against. Anytime I can rest my rifle on a tree, on a tripod, on a bipod, on
my
the ground,
knee.
on your knee. I am going to increase the points of contact. Buttstocks welded to my chest. The comb is welded to my cheek, and I have 2 hands on the gun. I've got a minimum 4 points of contact.
Right.
Pistol, you've got 2 points of contact. You've got a very short sighting plane. Movements of the barrel one way or the other have tremendous consequences down
range. And the trigger control.
The trigger control
You're just moving the
whole gun moves when you press the trigger, right? So the mass of the gun is considerably lower.
No, I couldn't agree more. And I wouldn't have 10 years ago.
Right, yeah.
Not until I went through the schooling that you're talking about, where the trigger control was made so obvious.
Right.
That's so, there may be people that disagree with you, but we need to put them in front of Scott Hill.
Come to our shooting school. We'll see how you do.
No, I do agree, and that would seem weird that you shooting a weapon that you're not going to use for hunting is going to improve you with your hunting weapon, and it's 100% true.
But I also think it'll make your bowling better too.
Weirdly enough.
But we were originally talking about navigating the legal structure. Shooting's a big part of that, obviously. But navigating the legal structure is a thing that I think some people come into this and don't even really realize is in place. So when I first started to have the desire to hunt, I had no idea kind of what I was going to have to navigate. If you're hearing this show and you're thinking, I would like to hunt, but not right now, but maybe, 5-6 years from now I'm going to hunt, go right now and find your local, hunter safety class and go take that. Because that's where you get exposure in your state to your state regulations, how your seasons work, where you find all that information. It's not a small thing to get caught doing something illegally while you're hunting or fishing.
Even 100% honest, well-intentioned people make mistakes. They misinterpreted something. They didn't realize something had changed. And that's not to scare people away. Again, as I've said in other places, in many cases when you are 100% truthful with wardens and you don't try to conceal anything, there's often a discussion that happens rather than automatic
ticketing or loss of licenses.
But again, we're getting back to the reason why having a mentor is so important, whether that's a mentor that you find that works with you or a mentor that you're paying for in some way, whether that's work, trade,
or a guide, or hiring a guide.
They know how to navigate all that. And now we're talking about all of these things that you need to learn, all of the variables. You get to almost remove this whole section of things, the laws and regulations. They're going to make sure that you're within that.
Yeah.
They're putting you out there at a certain time. They're putting you on the animal. They've already made sure that you have the necessary permits, and you get to focus on the other aspects of hunting, like marksmanship and stealth and so on. It's a huge help. I think a lot of people think that you're just supposed to go out and you just somehow learn this, keeping in mind that hunter-gatherers, male hunters, reached peak efficiency at 40 years of age in their hunting.
So awesome.
So and just imagine that you're hunting to survive your entire life, and you're still getting better too.
Yeah.
So it's okay to recognize that this is a large topic that you need help with.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, I can think of some of the, because like we were talking about before, my approach will be like sort of monograph my way through understanding a little bit about the species and the hunt or the fishery or the harvest of a plant or whatever it is, then finding somebody who I can go with massively reduces the learning curve. But I can think of lots of times I've been out with somebody and they're like, oh, you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't do this, you can't do that, oh, you're not allowed to do that, oh, leave that, you can't have it. And being like, there's what? There's like that many things.
Yeah.
But there are that many things. And I guess like what I was saying before about the complexity is I feel like in some ways it almost feels like the states, at least I'll speak for our state, sometimes I feel like it almost like they need to step back and look at this hodgepodge of laws
because it's all been created over time.
Yeah, and almost like, how do we just do an overhaul on this whole thing? It's not that we need to even get rid of any of it, but like how people interact with it. Because if you hand that law book to the uninitiated, it's not an easy thing to navigate.
No, it isn't.
It's a little confusing and it's a bit overwhelming in little details. If you scan read, you might miss really crucial pieces.
Right.
So going out with people who do it, who you trust are doing it legally, or I think hiring guides, even though it can be a little bit pricey, you know, they're taking you to an actual good spot. They're putting you on the actual animal. They are showing you the equipment. They have good equipment. You know, you're seeing it done at a sort of in an optimal level. So I think it can be really valuable.
And remember, those laws, they're trying to that deep ethic of sustainability. I'm not claiming that everyone is like devoid of this ethic, but we sometimes don't even know what it is, right?
Yeah.
We're living indoors, we're working indoors, we're not out there in the field 24/7 like a wild person would be. The laws are our best attempt to make sure that we as a hunting or fishing culture don't extirpate, cause local extinctions in animals.
Right. Yeah. Like that's a great point too. This way it's a common denominator. It's like you don't have to know what everybody's ethics are. Not everybody has to be on board. It's just that the legal structure.
Just do this.
But yeah, that's interesting because there's also a lot of stuff.
Not to claim that it's a perfect way to do it.
No, but I would say it would be hard to look around the world and find something better than the North American model of conservation, which is in its infancy still and has made a lot of mistakes, but is a self-correcting mechanism, which is cool. And it's science-based, which is really nice. Like at least you're getting, it's based on science. I will say it gets heavily influenced by economic stuff, but...
that's a frustration to me. I saw a phrase recently, and it was called ballot box biology.
Oh, yeah.
Where everyone's voting in on something, but it might be a voting that's based heavily on an emotion, which, not that there's anything wrong with that, but emotions need to be tempered with intellect as well, and sometimes things get really skewed. So we don't want you hunting this for no good reason, then we just don't like it.
Yeah.
That kind of thing.
Or on the flip, where we need to stop fishing this because the fish is in danger, in peril, and we want to keep fishing it because that's our jobs. And so you got both sides.
Yes, you're right.
You do have it on both sides, and that's a lot of stuff to navigate. But other times you have things, I remember when we were at our guides course, somebody made a comment about not shooting ducks on the water. And, we have that saying, that's a sitting duck. And I've wondered for a long time, as somebody who hunts for food, like what is the difference if I shoot the duck while it's on the water or I shoot it in the air? So I sincerely still, nobody's been able to give me, except that the sporting idea. It's just more sporting, which to me is not a thing. I don't have that in me.
I'm not here
to play sports with this animal.
Yes.
Yeah, it's not that. It's not a baseball. It's a bird.
We are in a very long, evolutionarily speaking, what I'm trying to say here, we're in a very long history of an interaction that we've had, me as a predator, or coming from this heritage as a predator, and this species as being one of my prey that I have gratitude for. But that interaction is to acquire food for the table to feed myself, my friends, and my community. And it's strange to me that sport says do this. Mm-hmm. Sure, give me a reason why sport says that, and then I'll comply, but not just because.
Just because. Yeah, now I will say, I guess if I was going to try to, argue the other side of it, I understand that unregulated market hunting led to more than just extirpations. In some instances, like we were talking about passenger pigeons earlier today, led to extinctions. Right, people just firing cannons full of broken glass and into flocks of passenger pigeons. Right, so I can see where some of the sporting ethics developed during a time where conservation ethoses were changing, and so I do understand that. But I think now we're at a point where this new breed of hunter who's emerging, who is coming at it specifically for food and not as a recreational sport. Mm-hmm. It's almost like we need to reorient some of these, because some of the ethics don't actually really make sense.
Follow the bag limits, follow the possession limits.
Yeah, exactly.
Do that, because those are what the biologists who are doing the surveys believe we're able to harvest each year. And if it seems that things are changing, populations are declining as a result of those hunting pressures, or for that matter, for any pressure that's going on, they adjust.
Yep. Yeah, and they have target sort of take, right? It's like, okay, we're going to take 11% this year because this species can handle an 11% mortality, and it's still compensatory. It doesn't add to the mortality of that population. I think another thing that people, maybe if you're new to it, you hear about bag limits and you hear about possession limits and you hear about seasons, but maybe you don't know the term method of take, which is
also plays in.
Which is also important because, like you might think, okay, well, I'm following the bag limit, but you might be doing it with a weapon that's illegal to do it with. So, for instance, here in Maine, it's like, let's go through a couple of them. Like, you need to have a crossbow that pulls 100 pounds to legally hunt, right? Deer, bear, or turkey here. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And I believe, like with a bow, it has to pull 35 pounds for deer or bear, but it has to pull 45 pounds for moose.
That's right.
Or you can hunt turkeys with shotguns, but you absolutely cannot use a rifle.
Right.
Right.
Even though you're like, but it would be lethal and it would work. The problem is that you can now shoot them from
hundreds of yards away.
Greater distances, and so your chances of success go up. And what's really interesting, as you've talked about before, is they don't expect everyone with a license to succeed.
Yep.
There is a success rate that gets factored into what their bag limits are set at.
So if you become too successful, it changes the algorithm a little bit. Right? Which is pretty fascinating. So they're expecting a significant amount of failure. And that's regional too, because it's like you'll see, okay, we know that in zone A, because they'll usually break up a state into different zones. So let's say, okay, over here in zone A, we know it's 11% success on this hunt, but over here it's 70%. And that's based on population and landscape, habitat, all these factors. So, a lot goes into this stuff, but they are expecting you to fail. So if at some level, certain people, so if you increase your efficacy with what they want you to do is increase your efficacy through strategy, not through equipment in many cases.
Right.
That's why right now a lot of states have preemptively banned drones in the use of drones in hunts. Now this is going to get interesting because I don't see that happening in fisheries, and people are using lots of drone technology underwater right now. So we'll see where that goes. But
Yes.
but it's a little encumbering for someone like myself who is making a show, and you want to fly the drone sometimes. But if I can just fly the drone, then I can spot game, and then I know where they are, and that gives me such an advantage that would increase my success rate, and that could actually adversely affect the conservation effort. So it makes sense, but yeah, knowing the method of take is really important because, with duck hunting, for instance, right? It's not only is it shotgun only, it's shotgun and archery only, but when it's shotgun, it is a shotgun that only can hold 3 rounds.
Yes, right.
2 in the magazine, 1 in the chamber. And then it is only non-toxic shot, no lead, and...
Which changes things.
Yeah, which changes the terminal effectiveness of the rounds. And in addition to that, it has to be a certain certified type of non-toxic round. So if you introduce, at first it was stainless steel, right? But then people start producing things like, bismuth and tungsten alloy and stuff like that. Those have to be approved.
Right.
So you have to have very specific weapons and very specific ammunition in some instances. 22 caliber here in Maine. Again, we can use 22 Magnum on deer, but not a 22 long rifle on deer. So this stuff all has to be worked out too. And so it's like
it's again why I like the way you refer to that. This monograph approach works so well. We're talking. I think we're trying to present how complex it can be, but at the same time, I'm not trying to scare anybody away. It can be reduced down to a relatively straightforward thing that you can learn without having a PhD in all of these fields. So don't be overwhelmed. Just take each animal and each weapon alone and work on them so that you don't feel like you have to understand the ballistics of all these different rifles, all the different rounds that can be put through the rifles, all the different amounts of powder that you can put in the shells and how that changes things. Right. I mean, everything.
Yeah, grain weights. Yeah, I used to always say with plants, I'd be like, just pick one plant that's really common and easy. You're not going to miss it. Like I always say, like just start with dandelions. Like if you need a first plant, it's like you're not going to miss. Hopefully, I guess you could, but it's easy to identify. It's very common. Its uses are very simple,
and you're not going to eradicate it.
You're not no conservation issues, right? It's non-native as
while
it is.
You develop your ethics, which are based on an understanding of each species' biology. Start with things that you can't harm. Japanese knotweed.
Right.
Try to harm it.
Right, exactly. So when it comes to hunting, it's like just pick a species. If I was starting with no mentors and no background in it, I would probably go like squirrels would be where I would
That's
probably
what I
start
started
there,
with.
Right? Yeah. They're pretty much everywhere. There's several different species.
Red squirrels can be hunted year-round in the state of Maine that you can actually continue to work on all of the facets of hunting without ever having to take a break.
You get pretty generous bag limits in a lot of places. We don't here, but, as you start going south, I mean, here we got 4 squirrels a day.
Yeah.
But, I was just looking down in Georgia and in the Carolinas, it's 10 in North Carolina. I think it's a dozen in Georgia right now, something like that. So
I'm literally moving.
I know, it's so much. It also gives you the opportunity to butcher at a very small scale, but an animal who's got the comparative anatomy of a larger animal.
It's not the exact same, but it is the exact same.
Close, though,
I mean, all you're doing is scaling up.
Yeah.
And each animal has its own things that we do when we butcher, but you get to see all of it in when you're looking at a squirrel without being overwhelmed. You've got this 150-pound deer or more sitting in front of you like, what the hell do I do with it all?
And you can do it on your kitchen counter.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like in your kitchen sink if you want. And I also think there's something to be said for the quantity. So like my neighbor who used to be a captain on a commercial boat, he said when they would bring a new guy on and he'd have to learn to fillet fish, they would basically just throw down a box of fish in front of him and be just like, cut these. Just, because they knew that it was number of times.
Oh, yeah.
Was a big part, right? So if you can sit down and butcher out a dozen squirrels, that's 12 times nose to tail you get to practice in a session. Like
Right.
that's really, really valuable too. So that's what I would do. And I would just be looking at the rule book, like how many can I take? When can I take them? What can I use to take them? Like the other thing I'll say, do you find yourself calling in a lot? I'm calling all the time to the
Oh
department.
yeah, definitely. I don't know why people don't do that more often.
I think they're afraid of like authority or something.
Almost like they're given away that they might have been doing something wrong. Or
Yeah.
No, I preemptively call.
That's actually a really good point there, because I find that there's two ways to approach the regulatory bodies over this stuff. Here we call it inland fish and wildlife. A lot of places fish and game. Federal level it's fish and game, I believe. You can approach them like they're trying to catch you doing something and you're avoiding them all the time, or you can approach them like, these are my buddies, they're here to help.
The former was my original approach.
Okay, so you
I was
already
just
had that.
terrified
Yeah.
all the time
Yeah.
that I was going to do something wrong, even though I was doing my
They're
best.
out there with the binos
Yeah.
looking for you. I actually just got to see over Christmas some episodes of Northwood's Law,
Oh, right.
which I had never seen, but at Christmas time
I've just seen a few clips. That's it.
Christmas time I am sort of subjected to television a little bit more than normal. I got to see two things. I got to see a lot of one of those HGTV renovation and sell it shows, which I've never seen. I always hear people talking about that. And I was like, well, this is fascinating. I didn't even know about this world existed. But I also saw a lot of Northwood's Law. And it's funny, one of the wardens is a friend of mine and somebody who's at parties here in town all the time. And I was like, oh, that's why he acts like a celebrity. Look at him. He's on every episode. But yeah, you see people who are ducking them, obviously lying. Like those are the hardest things to watch. Where it's like, dude, he saw you do it and now you're lying to him. Like,
I don't know what you're talking
Yeah,
about.
exactly.
He shows the picture. I don't know what you're talking
Yeah, that
about.
is not me.
Is that your tattoo right here, sir?
Exactly. I heard what was this thing I heard the other day? Something, if you heard this one, it's let's see, warden sees a guy shoot a loon, approaches him and says, what are you doing? He says, I eat them. Warden's like, what? He's like, yeah, I've shot one before. They eat great. The warden's like, really? What do they taste like? He's like, it's like a cross between a bald eagle and a manatee.
I've heard that joke before.
But anyway, I approach these guys like, well, one, they work for you,
Yes.
Second, the idea is that game and fish and game are owned and trusted by the state. Therefore, you are in your state the owner, in part, at a legal level, not obviously at a deep moral level or anything, but at a legal level, you're the owner of the game, and the warden has been entrusted to protect your game. So the warden's like the security guard at your bank where you make deposits and you make withdrawals, and that person's there to protect your money. It's like that, in a sense, how it's legally set up. So because
You just have to change the way you view the
mentally frame
relationship.
it. Yeah, once you see it as, hey man, thanks for protecting our resources, and if I make a mistake, it's an accident, and I'm just gonna please help me to not make those mistakes, and call these people up and talk to them. That once you develop a relationship with your warden too, it's pretty cool. Like they see you out there and you're on their side. That's really nice. Right. And but yeah, I'm always going like, wait a second, am I allowed to do this, or something that is not well enumerated in the book that I want clarity on? So yeah, I probably call in a couple times a month.
What's direct physical contact between guide and client actually mean?
Right.
Or when they say with an ice fishing trap that you must be in constant supervision, it's actually, at least to some wardens, it's not. You just have to be there every 20 minutes.
Yep.
And so you'd read the book and say, I can't leave my traps. But in actuality, you can step off the ice to grab a drink and come, hot drink of something or whatever it is you're doing at lunch and get back out. You have this time span depending on the warden that you talk to. So there's a little bit of interpretation that goes on by each warden, and it's just good to know what their take is too. But that's one of the things I've run into. The words read, you must be there 100% of the time. And yet the warden will tell you, no, it's every 20 minutes. You have to be there. Can't be gone more than 20 minutes from your ice fishing traps.
Yeah, and I've actually now kind of gotten to develop relationships in the department with wardens, but also with people on the marketing side of inland fish and wildlife, and people who are regulators. And you can also go to the hearings where decisions are being made, and you can, voice, because you are actually holding in trust the game with the rest of the people who are citizens of your state, so residents of your state. So, it's good to develop a good relationship over there. Wow, that's that's a lot of stuff we just talked about. I didn't realize we were going to make it seem so complicated to people.
I didn't even know that was going to happen.
I didn't either. But to simplify, like we were saying, if you take it one species at a time, either get a mentor or work through your rule book. Do you like to keep a hard copy of that book, or do you keep it on your phone?
I do. I keep a hard copy that we keep right in the vehicle, so that anywhere we are when we have a question. In some cases, I'm even in some places where the fishing regulations are, there's too many special codes. It's just in the pack too.
Yeah, I know. I keep one with my ice fishing bucket in a plastic Ziploc bag, so it stays dry. But when I go, where I find my local regulations is either at the town hall. The outfitter will have them. The fishing shop will have them.
Like if you go to a place where you're buying hunting and fishing equipment,
they're usually going to have
there.
it. So I'll usually grab multiple copies. They're free, and they're not liking that as much anymore because they're trying to get away from printed copies, which I really wish they wouldn't, because now I also keep them on my phone, so you can download them. So I have them, in basically like a book app on my phone, which is occasionally really convenient too. But I really like to have the hard copies, especially out in the field. So I'll get multiple copies. Now, they're going to be moving everything online over time, and the book copies will be harder to get wherever you are, I'm sure, over time. Sometimes I just wish I had like laminated copies.
I know, just so it was like impervious to the weather.
I've got this book, Lemaster's Guide to Duck Identification, I think it's called. Have you seen that? It's a little spiral-bound book about this big. It's quite poorly printed, but it allows you to field identify any bird, right? Because I find the duck regulations can be real challenging, especially when you're new to it. Like, I'm fairly new to waterfowl, and you're supposed to determine
you have different bag limits
with each species
while it's flying by you.
So, the bird's cruising by.
I didn't think that was a Barrow's goldeneye.
Yeah, right, which you can't take none of. So, right. It's very complicated stuff, And it'll be like, the limit is 5 ducks, but it'll
not
be
all one species.
Yeah, but only 4 can be this, and only 4 can be that. Only 2 can be that. Only 2 can be this. So it's just like a tongue twister, sorting through that. But so I have this great book, Lemaster's Field Guide to Duck Identification. It might as well be printed on toilet paper. I do not understand why they've made it out of such a porous and flimsy paper, because it's made to be used waterfowling. But anyway, my buddy has taken off the binding and laminated each page and then rebound them. And it's so cool, So I kind of wish, but those regulations change every year, so you wouldn't want to do that. And that's another thing, is like you were saying, you mentioned this before, the regs can change pretty significantly year to year, and it's not like anyone comes knocking on your door to
let you know.
So sometimes when I hunt with some of like the old timers, they'll have 1970s laws in their head still. And you're like, no, man, that's changed.
And it's dialed in. They can recite it.
Yeah, you're like, no, it's changed, man. This year there were some significant changes to the take of togue. I think you probably have seen some of that. Luckily now, as guides, we get those emails, which kind of keep us up to date a little bit. But that's useful, because otherwise it's rereading the book every season, and it just gets to be a lot. So anyway, take it chunk by chunk. But when you get your regulations, you do need to really look over certain things, like what are your hunter orange regulations? What are your shooting times?
You don't want to be the person who continually breaks these rules so that now they're just keeping an eye on you. Mm-hmm. You just want to be in the clear all the time.
Yeah, and maintain your license. Like at this point for me, a loss of my hunting license would be like catastrophic. That'd be catastrophic to me. You got to be careful.
You may now be a herder gatherer. You will have goats and you will forage.
Oh man. Yeah. What else do you want to talk about?
Well, there's a bunch of different directions that you could go, and we're piggybacking off that original podcast that you did, Finding Your Niche, as you mentioned at the beginning of this dialogue that we're having. And I felt it was a very thorough establishment of all of these things that you need to consider when you get started. And as you know, in other times where I've been at an event with you, whether we were doing it or somebody else, I always like to go after. I like you to lay the groundwork, because you often have sometimes a very novel way of taking complex topics and making them simple and establishing this framework. And then it's like, I just feel like this weight has been lifted and I just get to dive into whatever fun topics
I
want.
after you go, I'm like, I'm an idiot.
No. No, it's really, really good. But we've broached it just a little bit in this particular talk that we're doing, and it might be worthwhile to go even deeper and talk about. Well, I don't know that we can say that this is cut and dry, but talking about non-toxic ammunition for all species.
I'd love to talk about that, and I'll just preface it by saying I'm not 100% on board. And wait,
Right.
I'm mentally on board.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
But
Yeah.
I'm not a user of completely. I'm finding myself using more and more non-toxic rounds because there's a movement towards them generally happening. But I'd be really interested in hearing what you have to say about it.
But I think this is what's going to be so valuable for people. I mean, we should lay out just the basic background story for people, and I can start or you can start. It doesn't matter. But
no, please, I'll jump in if I see.
Yeah, please. So essentially, what was being found with some.
Oh, can we back up more than that?
Yeah.
Let's back up to the physics of why lead in the first place.
No, that's a good. Yeah, please, because obviously, well, I'm going to turn this part over. All I'd like to say is there is a reason that we were using lead, and it wasn't just cost.
Yeah. Oh no, like lead has been this metal through time. I mean, it's so easy to smelt. It's got a very low boiling point, a low melting point.
Right.
So you can easily work it at home.
Right.
Do you have a lot of friends who are like, oh yeah, I grew up like melting lead in my, making shot or making bullets or making fishing weights right in their garage, just huffing melted lead fumes.
Without knowing they were.
We'd put it in the crock pot.
Yeah, I had friends who were making their own for revolvers that they had put together. I mean, talking about some really skilled hunters who were just wanting to do even more aspects of it themselves. And making their own rounds.
And I mean, even looking back through history, where it's being used to pipe water in the aqueducts in Rome. I mean,
my grandfather still remembers cutting off his lead pipes to make fishing weights.
Oh my goodness!
In the home,
in his house.
Yeah,
lead pipes.
Lead pipes.
My goodness! I grew up in the era of lead paint.
Chips,
right. Well, actually, in removing lead paint was
right.
That's the era that I remember first learning about lead. But it's a really easy and ductile metal. It's very easy to work with. It's got interesting ballistic qualities in that it's heavy. That's one key component of it. It's very heavy.
I don't think that gets enough emphasis, because some of the steel shot has this. I mean, it was so long as you're within a certain distance, it's going out, and then it just after a certain distance, it just doesn't hit hard enough anymore, which is one of the reasons why people have been trying to develop those heavier than lead non-toxics, like tungsten, nickel, iron type stuff, which isn't 100% non-toxic.
Back to the paper airplane, that would be a great way to describe it. It's like no matter how much energy you throw a paper airplane with, it's just too light. It just drops off
quickly
because you can't put enough kinetic energy into it, right? So the mass of lead makes it a really ideal metal to basically throw at things ballistically. But then also, because it's so ductile, when it hits the target, it mushrooms and deforms. So that, because
it gets bigger. Effectively, the diameter of the round gets larger, so it causes more damage as it goes through the animal.
And it often stays. So there's a couple schools of thought here. One is that you'd want the bullet to pass through, and others that you want the bullet to stay inside the body. I don't want to go too deep down that, but you can picture that this thing, not only is it mushrooming as it hits, but it's dumping the kinetic energy into the animal. And that causes a big expansion inside. So it's not like an arrow, which is essentially a modern broadhead would be like putting razor blades through something.
It's a scalpel.
Punches in, punches out, and the animal exsanguates. Like you said, it bleeds to death. Whereas a bullet causes this hydrostatic shock. The inside, that bullet channel, it's so much energy in the bullet that when it enters and deforms, it doesn't just cut a channel the width of the bullet. The channel expands massively, sometimes 3, 4, 5, 6 inches before it recontracts down.
Right. There's two things. There's the permanent wound channel,
Yeah.
and then there is a temporary
Cavity.
that's created.
And so as this metal deforms, it dumps energy in there. And one last thing I want to say that's useful to think about with lead is that, well, I'm sure there's a lot of useful things to think about lead, but here's one more in regards to what we're talking about. When you're shooting shot, so, little pellets from a shotgun, you don't always find it all. And obviously we don't want to be eating lead and lead residue, but if you bite down on a piece of lead, just like a lot of people know from clothes and fishing weights, split shot weights around a fishing line, piece of monofilament, when you bite down on it, it's soft enough, it doesn't break your tooth. If you bite down on basically a stainless steel ball bearing, you can definitely break a tooth or cause damage to your teeth. So back in the day, people shooting squirrels, shooting ducks with lead shot, they were less concerned about that. You just find it and spit it out. Now, obviously, again, that's not what I want to do, but
you didn't have to worry about damaging your teeth.
Or I'm more worried about the people I'm feeding game to because I don't want them to walk away. My first venison experience there was hair all through the venison, and I was I was probably 15 years old. I'm at that stage where it's you want to just spray yourself an Axe cologne or whatever. You're not thinking about the idea. I didn't care about the quality of the meat or that it was wild game. I just knew there was hair in it. This is disgusting. When you're a teenager, you just want to be so fresh and so clean. I was just ew, gross. So anyway, now when I serve meat to people, I trim it very clean of connective tissue or gristle. I make sure there's no hair in it. And I especially don't want them to bite down on a piece of metal and break their tooth. So that's something to think about too, is I'm more worried about the people I'm sharing it with sometimes because it's my responsibility to make sure that it's what they're eating is safe. That said, I don't think, I was going to say I don't think we need to talk too much about the ill effects of lead, but maybe we do. I'll pass it on to you.
Hey, we'll get right back to the interview in a moment, but first, domesticated, civilized living restricts the natural movement of your human body, forcing you daily into chairs, cars, and rigidly defined pathways. But when we head out onto wild landscapes, we carry these dysfunctional, domesticated movement patterns with us. MoveNat is a natural movement system that trains you and your body to move like a human animal again. Are you interested in building natural movement skills that'll improve your physical capability in the field and in everyday life? MoveNat's new Level 1 Fundamentals e-course is structured to help you re-educate your body using practical, natural movements that enhance fitness, function, and physical capabilities, all from the convenience of your home. Learn to move the way nature intended. I attended MoveNat's Level 1 and 2 trainer certification courses a few years back and came away with practical knowledge and skills that I use every day and that have changed the way I train and move across the landscape, vastly improving my overall mobility, coordination, and fitness. This new e-course is movement-rich with clear instruction. Its progression-focused methodology takes you from restorative mobility exercises to challenging movements. All ability levels are welcomed and accounted for. Enroll now at wild-fed.com/MoveNat for instant access to the full e-course. Again, that's wild-fed.com/MoveNat, MoveNat. Again, wild-fed.com/MoveNat for instant access to the full e-course containing 16 classes designed to be followed over 4 weeks with specific and measurable movement goals for each week. The course is self-paced and you'll receive lifetime access. MoveNat. I can personally recommend it. It's a fitness and movement system that's designed for the wild. Now, back to the show.
So I can fold that into the story that people started to essentially question when we're using lead shot and remembering that many rounds are actually designed to shed their mass so that they don't stay whole. As they go through the animal, they're losing part of their mass as small fragments, microscopic particles, and things like that. There was a question about the safety of eating the animals. And when they started looking at these animals, they were finding that, yes, there were microscopic fragments of lead situated within the muscle mass, within the viscera, inside the cavity, and so on. And, there's a few studies that you can reference now. Some have been done in a particular state, like Wisconsin. There's one in Minnesota. There's others that have happened in California. And essentially, they're all finding the same thing, that, yes, most lead rounds, and there's a couple of exceptions, and we can talk about them, are essentially fragmenting. I don't mean that the whole round fragments, but that tiny microscopic fragments are coming off, and they're not just located near the actual wound channel. Sometimes they're significant distance from the wound channel, up to 3 feet away, in fact.
Wow.
And people...
I mean, the typical, let's say your average rifle round is going to be traveling at 2,000 feet per second, would be if I was just going to throw a dart at the middle of it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, and at those speeds, there's all this stuff happening to the lead bullet. And so they tested this in a number of ways, one of which was to essentially take kind of like an X-ray to see where this all was. And then they used methods to make sure they knew that the lead was coming from the bullet. In other words, that the lead hadn't been there as just environmental contamination. They were able to determine this is the source of the lead by looking at the, I might be correct in saying the isotope of that lead, but some strategy like that. And then they started thinking about not just humans who would be consuming it, but also the scavengers who would be consuming these carcasses. And lead, of course, has a number of things number of reasons why we don't want to consume it, especially in children. It has an impact on IQ. It has an impact on immune system function, weight gain, and all of these things.
Behavioral stuff, too.
Yeah, it's really serious stuff. And again, there's, especially in developing humans, infants and children get hit with it much more than adults do. And so you started to see a movement of people wanting a non-toxic projectile.
Oh, wait, let's add one more piece in, which is that there was also the stuff with the California condor.
Yeah, species that consume the carrion left behind by hunters.
And then one other piece would be with waterfowling, because as we mentioned earlier...
That was an earlier change.
Okay, waterfowl, that's a federal regulation, so... You cannot shoot waterfowl, or I think it's all migratory birds. Does that include, because like for instance with woodcock, which is a migratory, but it's an upland bird.
But it's not considered to be a waterfowl.
It's like I'm calling up again. Anyway, when you shoot waterfowl, you can't use lead shot, and that had to do more with them putting the lead pellets, or the fear that they were using lead pellets in their gizzards. Or?
Well, they were consuming them because when you're shooting out into the wetlands. Yeah. The pellets have to land somewhere, and they were being consumed, whether intentionally or unintentionally, and it may have been both, depending on the location, and then they were expiring because of lead toxicity.
Okay, I was under the impression it was that they were using them like pebbles in their crop. They're in the gizzard, but maybe it's just actually eating them too.
And so what they were finding in places where there were a lot of waterfowl hunters, like in the Chesapeake Bay region, there are just hundreds and hundreds of these dead species of ducks that are just piling up. And you can see these pictures. They're really graphic pictures.
I've never seen this.
Yeah, they're just this massive mound of ducks that have no physical obvious reason, that they didn't run into a vehicle, they weren't taken by a predator, they just looked totally intact. And when they started examining the issue, they found that it was lead toxicity.
Wow.
And so that was the reason they changed in that setting. And there was here it was directly lethal to the animal using the lead ammunition, but in a secondary way. The hunter might not be getting the animal, but it was still just dying. In the case that we're talking about, it's not exactly the same, but humans that consume the carcass and other scavengers, whether those, in the case of the California condor, or ravens, crows, turkey vultures, skunks, raccoons, we can just keep going, coyotes, all of these animals that would be eating it, they're consuming a small amount of lead from these carcasses. And they've shown that, people who consume it do demonstrate elevated levels of lead for a short time. And not that this was, not that, what people will now say is, well, I've been hunting my whole life. I've shot everything with lead and I'm just fine, right? And I think it's really important to sort of just combat that a little bit by saying, well, there may be other factors in your life that are protecting you from those harmful effects that might not be present in this person's life. And because you are not experiencing effects, or at least you don't know that you're experiencing.
I was going to say, or maybe you don't know you're experiencing effects.
That doesn't mean that it's safe. We all know people who smoked and lived a long life and did not die of emphysema, lung disease, lung cancer, anything of the sort. It happens sometimes. But especially in the children who are exposed to this, we have no idea, like, well, what would your IQ score be had you never been exposed to that in a really strong hunting family? You're awesome now, but maybe you could have been 5 points higher, or however we want to measure that intellectual.
Which has tremendous outcomes on your success later in life. I mean, that's one of the number one determiners of your socioeconomic success.
Within this industrial society, it's really important that you have everything going for you in that realm. So other studies that have been done, though, have been kind of interesting because they've been looking at, well, is all lead the same? In other words, do all lead rounds have this contamination? Remember, sometimes I think the mean in one study was like 136 microfragments that were found throughout the animal. Wow. And the lower the velocity, the better off you are.
Because it sheds less.
Yeah, so muzzle loaders and shotgun slugs, nowhere near as harmful to use as certain rifle rounds.
Okay, I want to explain something real quick, too. Recently, I had been talking to you about rounds developed for grizzly protection and bears based on our bear hunts.
Yes.
And I was looking at what are people using where in a life and death scenario with bears, because we've seen mixed results with different rounds in different calibers and different grain weights within a caliber on bears. So
Yes.
I started looking at what they call cast bullets, or solid bullets. They'll sometimes be called solids, but they're referring to it's a lead alloy. It's a cast bullet, but it's designed not to shed any mass. Now that bullet will kill. You could shoot probably shoot most animals in the rear and have it get into their vital zones. You know what I mean?
Right.
Because it all of that mass and all of that velocity, it just continues like a freight train. It just doesn't ever shed any mass, and it doesn't deform.
It's a penetrating round.
It's a penetrating round. However, that's effective if you are trying to get around, like, let's say, into the central nervous system, a brain shot. You need to get a shot. I have personally seen a bullet flatten from a pistol, flatten on the skull of a bear and not penetrate the skull. And that's kind of a scary idea to me for both bear and person. So a bullet like this will penetrate. So it'll be used to protect yourself against an animal. However, for people, let's say you're a fly fishing guide in Alaska and you're concerned about, brown bears or something like that, they would carry something like this. But this is not a round you'd want to hunt with, because you want that dump of energy. You want that expansion. Right. It's not that you couldn't hunt with it. A lot of African big game it's used for, where they have very thick hides and a lot of muscle mass and heavy bones. But that's not, for most of us hunting here in North America, let's say, that's not a real effective hunting round like the way that something that will have some expansion would be. So I'm saying that to point out that there are lead rounds that don't shed, but they're probably not really optimal hunting rounds.
Right, and one of the studies that I looked at actually did examine the difference between rounds that are designed to lose some of their mass and those that are stated to hold 100% of it, and they still usually lost some, but there was a massive difference. So that round, while it could be effective on a lot of game with the right marksman, right? That would always come back, because I always think of, we can shoot animals with very small bullets so long as we hit them in the right place.
A lot of story of elephants being killed with .22 rimfire.
It just, as you get a bigger round, your margin of error can be larger and larger and larger in some cases. And that round would probably be effective so long as it was with the right marksman. But they showed much less lead contamination in the carcass for the rounds that are meant to stay together. Okay. In fact, one of the lead rounds, which actually wasn't 100% lead that they tested, it had a copper apex and a lead base, shed significantly less lead particles.
Okay. So like a partitioned round.
Yeah, did a nice job as a middle of the road approach. Yep. So you could still get some of the advantages of lead without all of the contamination in the meat that you're bringing home. Mm-hmm. So obviously one of the solutions, and there's actually more than one solution to this, but one of the solutions is going to, say, a non-toxic round like copper, which is being used. The thing about copper is it's much lighter. And so
significantly lighter. You bought me a box of 308 copper rounds.
Yeah, to check out. That's right.
I don't remember the grain weight on them.
It's around 150, I think.
I think it might be less. Anyway, they're very light. They're very light, and they're significantly longer.
Well, the thing is you get to make a slightly bigger bullet because but still you want mass. But you're right, and often what ends up happening with the copper rounds is, in at least in some loads, they end up being much faster. So
because they're lighter.
Yeah. So you've got this balance that you're making. You've given up mass, but you've increased speed.
Muzzle velocity being a really important factor.
Yeah. And I have
all things being equal, you usually want a higher muzzle velocity.
That's right. And I don't understand ballistics enough to know that while we've lost mass and gained muzzle velocity, how that compares in the end to, again, is the phrase that you use, terminal performance. Does it kill the animal? But that's been one strategy. And what some manufacturers have done is, because copper doesn't malform itself in the same way that lead does, they have essentially designed into it a way for it to open up.
By scoring.
Yeah, by design features, or having it actually break into pieces. So you've got 4 or 5 lightweight pieces that spread out to
petals that peel off
to create that big wound channel with a slightly heavier base that continues on. So that's one approach that people have been using.
Do you know, just off the top of your head, is California already banned lead bullets altogether, right?
Yep, done.
So it's like,
and there's other places that have gone.
I get really annoyed when yesterday I got some paper. Printed paper, and
did it have that California thing?
Yeah, it's like known to cause cancer. And it's like, I think I've told you the story that we were selling bentonite clay, which is a nutritional supplement which people use for detoxification,
which you can eat,
which has been eaten for as long as people have known about bentonite clay. Yet we had to label it because all clays have trace amounts of naturally occurring lead isotope in it. You had to put known to cause cancer in the state of California. I'm always like, if I'm not in the state of California, does it still cause cancer?
I don't think just because one state has done something that means everyone is supposed to do it, for sure. But what has happened?
Oh, no, that's not why I brought that up.
But I mean,
they're so progressive there.
Yes.
That sometimes they're so progressive that I'm like, bleh. And other times I'm like, oh, that's the direction we should be going.
For sure.
But sometimes it's ridiculous, and I wonder where this goes. Yeah.
I think it's Minnesota. The one thing they did, though, is they actually stopped the gifting of deer to food pantries over this issue.
Wow.
So that because of the lead contamination, which again is, we don't want to present this as you're going to eat this carcass and because that's not what's happening, but it can lead to an increased body burden of lead. And in some individuals, especially young people, that could be more of a problem to, say, somebody with some robust health, a diverse diet, and so on. There are talks going on in Iowa, Wisconsin about where to go with all this. For me, the copper rounds combined with good marksmanship, I felt really comfortable with, but there's other routes. Because heavy metals can be chelated. In other words, we can use things to bind to them so that they do not get absorbed in your intestinal tract. In other words, they pass through your body and out. Yeah. And there are things like chlorella being one of the really good ones.
Let's just explain, just for people who don't know, what chlorella is.
It's an alga. It's a green alga, a single-celled green alga, so it's a plant, but not a complicated one like a tree or an orchid or something like that. It's a single-celled organism, and the cell wall material happens to be amazing at binding.
It's not a protist, it's a plant?
It's a plant. Yeah, a single-celled alga.
I thought algas were not plants.
Yeah, they are. Just really,
I'm getting really confused.
really less complicated ones in some cases.
Roger that.
Yeah, and the nice thing about it is because it's able to bind to things like heavy metals, that's the chelating that I referred to. It forms a complex, and that complex doesn't get absorbed by your intestinal tract. When they're all separate, it can pass through. And so there are other things that can do this.
Basically, it's ionized,
and
it can pass through. But when they're bound together, it's
That's right.
neutralized, and now it just passes through your body.
That's right. It goes out in your stool, and it's lost to your body, so you don't absorb it. And so the trick here is simply anytime you were eating a meal with meat that came from an animal shot with lead, you simply consume chlorella at the end of the meal, a dose, and it would help with that. Okay. But chlorella can be expensive, and so there's other things that could be eaten, strawberries, raspberries, cilantro leaf, which is a well-known chelator, and then for that matter, whole wheat has fiber that binds with things.
No kidding.
So, if I'm someplace eating a big meal and I have access to strawberries, and I'm talking about eating a big meal that's rich in, say, an ocean fish, different heavy metal we're talking about there, but we're still talking about a metal like mercury.
Yeah, they carry the same electrical charge.
Yeah, I co-consume strawberries with that meal as a way to prevent absorbing those things. Everyone always talks about, animals and bioaccumulating of toxins like you and I have talked about, but they also bioaccumulate nutrition. And we could just go off on a tangent now talking about the nutritional aspects of animals that are not found in plants. And vice versa. We could talk for a long time about that. The point is we don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. People say, oh, that shellfish has, mercury in it. I don't want to eat it. No, you do want to eat it, but you just want to eat it in a way you don't get the mercury. Right? Because you can't get the nutrition in that shellfish that you can get from plants. Whether we're talking about the active form of vitamin D, the active form of vitamin A, omega-3 fatty acids, heme, iron, all of these things are not found in plants. To put it real quickly. So there's different strategies that you can take. One would be, say, copper projectiles. One would be eating chelating foods at the same time. I'm just taking the precautionary principle and saying, for my hunting of non-human animals, I've gone to completely non-toxic rounds. You understand all of the ramifications,
of
that statement.
Don't eat long pig is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Without chlorella. So,
I should say quickly, there's also the archery route. Because even all our modern tackle, it doesn't shed mass. Most of it's made out of very hard metals so that they stay intact.
Now, this is an interesting point. I would love to sometime I would love to take the firearm position and you take the archery position sometime and do like a debate style. Really dialectic, but do it like debate style. I think it would be fun.
Well, I'm going to lose it though.
No,
it depends
I don't
on.
think so.
It depends.
You're good at this.
But it would depend on what the goals.
You do
were.
more research than me. Anyway, but when people take the position of, I only want to do archery. One of the things that comes up for me is like, well, it kind of limits what species you're going to end up eating
tremendously.
I note though that that it's legal to harvest all the species here with archery that you can harvest with firearms, but it's not as realistic. So
those sea ducks, as they're whipping at 40 miles an hour across the ocean,
you might occasionally get one. I'm not going to say you won't, but
back in 1976,
I got myself
one.
a duck. So you certainly would want to use the sitting duck thing a lot more, right?
There are certain animals that I'm just as effective with. I mean, in the terms of the span of the season.
Correct, yeah, I understand.
Right?
Yeah.
Within the season, I'm just as good with a bow as I am with a rifle, but if you told me you've got only 2 days, I'm going to go grab the rifle because I can get them at further distances.
Right. But that said, It's interesting to note. So I kind of think of it like I need to have a long-range rifle. This is what I like to have. I like to have a long-range rifle. By that I mean, that I can shoot beyond 100 yards with. I want to have a small caliber, small game rifle, like a Ruger 1022 for most jobs. I need a shotgun for birds. So if I need those things, what's interesting here is that the lower velocities of the shotgun, even if I was using lead shot, though more and more, like I turkey hunt with heavy shot anyway. So that's like a bismuth tungsten, I think. Nickel, maybe. Anyway, whatever's in that, it's lead free. All my ducks by necessity are. So my shotgun doesn't really see lead shot anyway. 22, I assume, is at a high enough velocity that you are going to shed. I don't find, mostly it's going through the game that I shoot. But archery would not, I think I would eat less squirrels if I only did archery. So it seems like you were saying, archery is a way around some of this, but for the person who's a generalist hunter who wants to get a little bit of everything, then you probably got to start looking at some of these other options that you're talking about.
Yeah, and it sort of leads to this topic of, I think about, there are those of us who have been hunting our whole lives, or we know people, there's literally like 25 firearms in their house, behind every door, above every door. And the reality is, if you're relatively new to hunting, and maybe you have a firearm that was gifted to you by an older relative or something, but you are not going to just like, let me just lay out, several $1,000s, right, and just go for it. I sometimes think about, if I were to do it over, or if I were trying to help people
start from scratch,
what would you start with so you had the maximum number of species that you could hunt?
Oh, before you say this, because this is really interesting. Do you mind if I
no,
interject
please,
something from before?
Because
I want to go where you're going with this. I want to say, if I took a piece of 8.5 by 11 printer paper and an exposed lead tip bullet, I could write on it like a pencil. There's a reason we call it a pencil lead, right? Even though it's graphite. So I'm very aware when I'm handling exposed lead bullets that no matter, they're not going at any velocity. I'm just handling them in my hand, but I know that there's lead particles on me, and that my skin is oily, and so I know that I don't mean my skin's particularly oily, but I mean
human skin
has oils. So
it's getting on me.
It's like the creepiest thing I've ever said on here. And I have oily skin. But yeah, so I'm very careful about washing my hands. Now, in the wintertime, I tend to go to the indoor range. If I need to sight in a gun or something like that. I was just there yesterday sighting in a weapon for a hunt that I'm going on. They've got these big blowers in there vacuuming out the air because of the lead.
Like, they're cognizant of what's happening.
Just a couple of precautions. They've got the air being vacuumed out and blown out. They've got, because there's lead often in primers too. It's not just a projectile, right? So you fire that round and you breathe in lead.
And the explosion, as it propels the base of the bullet, the base of that round, there's also, what do we want to describe that as? It's fracturing. I don't have the right word. I don't know what word to use. Liquefying. It's damaging the round and sending out lead dust from where the explosion occurs, unless it's jacketed with copper.
You're saying the rear side of the bullet. Yeah,
that's getting.
What I would say, because it hits boiling point probably with that explosion, and then you have gaseous lead in the air. So they know that. They're vacuuming that out. When you step out of the range there's a sort of breezeway room between the open building and the range, so that you have a quiet buffer. There's big adhesive sheets on the floor that are stacked up, and you can peel them off when you need a new one. So that you come out and it's tacky, so you step all over it and try to get all the lead dust off your feet.
Because it would have settled on the floor, and now you're walking.
Over the floor.
Right.
Then you go out and they have an EDTA-based hand wipe and soap. And even with all that, I know it's on my clothes. I know it's on my skin. You can only get so much off. And they're really mostly, I think, concerned about employees who go in and out all day and go home to their kids and everything.
Of course, that chronic exposure. But to jump in really quick, anytime you and I have come back from our shooting classes, all clothes go into the
Yeah.
wash
Oh,
and
it's-
I'm in the shower.
Yeah, and it's like eating lunch on the range is always a little challenging, right?
That was the one. I remember you bringing things to help with that I had not thought of before.
I get really concerned about that because even just loading the magazines, right? You're interacting with this. Now, you got to keep your weapons clean. Hopefully, keep your weapons clean. So, if you're working with lead, and as I mentioned, I'm not 100% on this. So, when I'm cleaning my guns, I now hire somebody to do it. How posh is that? So posh.
Do they have like the tools though? So it's like it comes back.
It comes back very nice.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I'm concerned just in the handling and maintenance, general maintenance of lead contamination as well. So as we get to this idea of if you are starting from scratch, for me, the biggest part of switching over is that I have known ballistic data on all of my bullets. I know what my guns like to eat. And switching is like, it's painful.
No.
So if I was starting over, I would start lead free from the beginning. Then you just always, the the bullets you sight your guns in with are lead free.
Because they don't hit the same place.
Yeah.
I can tell you at 50 yards when I was sighting in a rifle that I was using for hunting, it originally was shooting lead rounds. When I switched to copper, 2 inches, inch and a half difference that I had to adjust.
It's going faster and it's
just
lighter.
different.
It's less gravitational pull on it.
And so you can't just switch rounds and assume everything's
go out
the
and
same.
hunt that day without sighting the gun.
Yeah.
So you need to. So I would start fresh, lead free. I just think that would be easier. I also, before we go into sort of weapon selection stuff you were about to talk about, I just want to ask you about. I remember you posted online about this, about lead-free bullets. I was triggered. I was like, oh, fuck that. That's stupid. I don't want to hear about this. And I knew you were right, and I knew I agree.
And I know that you're also one of the most health-conscious people that I've ever met in my life.
And I was like, I don't want to talk about this, And,
but we did, though.
We did.
A lot.
Right. But I remember when I texted you that day, it was some stupid thing industry developed, push back against it. Well, what about this? It's so short-sighted of me. Anyway, I remember you felt in your communication, I was like, ooh, his senses are peaked right now too. He's getting some pushback. So
I got a lot.
Right. I could tell by the way you were texting that I was like, from your tone, I was like, ooh, he's getting some, he's having a fighting a lot of fires on a lot of different fronts.
Such a perfect way to describe it.
So what was the response? I'm curious because you'd think I'm sure there are people listening who are like, how is this not just a universally accepted yes for everyone? Let's go lead free with our bullets. That exists, and yes, but it's not that simple. So.
Right, and because they also cost more, and we're not talking lots more per round, but if you're somebody that shoots hundreds and hundreds all the time, it adds up.
Let me say this to people listening who are not real ballistically literate too. When you go buy a box of bullets at the store, when I say bullets, I'm really talking about the rounds themselves. That's the cartridge, the powder, the primer.
The bullet is just the projectile.
Bullet's just a projectile.
Right.
Typically, when you buy a bullet, that is made by the projectile part is made by a manufacturer and might be used across several different manufacturers' lines. So you could find the same projectile in different brands of fully constructed bullets. So you buy a box of 20 rounds and you can be like, oh, they use the such and such brand bullet in this.
Right.
So don't assume that the bullet, first of all, is the entire round. It's just the projectile. And know that you might find the same, you've sent me some literature on copper bullets or non-lead bullets. And you can find that same same lead-free projectile across a range of different
manufacturers of rounds, what goes into your rifle to shoot, they're just using the same bullet in many cases.
So I hope I explained that well. I feel like that sounds.
I know it sounds really complicated, but bullet is only.
You
part
might
of
find
it.
brand A's projectail and brand B, C, and D's fully constructed cartridges.
Right.
So there we go. So they are going to be more expensive. And some people make their own bullets at home, cast them, or some people load their own bullets at home.
And I don't even know, and this is my ignorance, I don't even know how easy that would be to do with copper. With lead, it's not hard.
Yeah,
because lots of people do it.
Yeah, I don't think you're going to cast your own copper.
That's
at
my
home.
point. So now
You're taking away somebody's idea of bullet sovereignty. So that's one thing.
Right.
A lot of people in the firearms industry are very budget conscious. So that's going to be a whole component of it. But a lot of it is like you're moved my cheese. It's just that like this is how I've always done it stuff too, right?
Well, humans don't like to change, right? There are some things
for evolutionarily good reasons.
Yeah.
Just that can lead us into peril now.
We have. Well, we'll adopt certain things, but we're really slow at adopting some things. And this discussion is no different than the one that was done with waterfowl hunters and lead versus steel shot. Everyone said, well, we'll never kill birds anymore.
All we're going to do is cripple birds.
Yeah. A study showed that the rate of crippling was actually no different. They might have lost a few yards. They had to make an adjustment. But once that was done, the rate of crippling was no different between steel and lead shot, for example. But it didn't matter. The perception was this is what's going to happen. A lot of folks, I think it's just you're asking people to make a change from a really known quantity of something.
Yeah.
I know this. And that was really hard. And not to mention, because everyone's alive who's been eating all of these lead-contaminated carcasses, they're not dead.
Yeah.
They're like, what's the point? I'm fine. And it's no different than, say, exposure to cigarette smoke. Yeah. You don't just smoke a cigarette and fall dead. Mm-hmm. It takes years in some cases for people who are predisposed to have issues.
And being alive doesn't
signify anything.
There's no quality assessment in being alive. It's just...
And so I think it was disbelief at first, but now I'm noticing I'm able to find more and more and more studies that are corroborating it. But I'm not telling people that they should just throw out all their lead rounds, but they might want to be a little extra careful with feeding it to children and think about co-consuming some of these chelating foods that we talked about. And maybe when the boxes run dry, start thinking about copper. I do with all hunting clients, which has not been that many yet because we've only just started this. But I make that suggestion to all of them. And I don't want to claim that it's a requirement, but it's like a really strong suggestion. Like, let's just start there. And so far, there's been no pushback.
It's okay. It's interesting, too, because we're in such a politically charged moment in the U.S., and there's a tendency to assume that all, green, like copper bullets, what are you, a commie?
Something's going to come up.
Because there tends to be, people who are eco-conscious tend to be more left-wing, and people who are hunters tend to be more on the right-wing side. And so
Dude, I'm as right-wing as it gets when it comes to hunting.
Exactly.
Right? But I still
as left-wing as it gets when it comes to the environment, though.
Yeah,
right?
That's right.
The thing.
I'm neither.
I have both wings. Oh, that's so shocking. But, my goodness. So funny. But I would imagine there's certain issues, and this just seems like one of them, where people, as soon as it comes up, they're so entrenched in the sort of tribalism of it that they don't even want to know what the evidence is, because it's just like, you saying it makes me think you're on the other side, therefore it's warfare.
Trust me, folks, I'm on hunters' sides. Mm-hmm. And for me, the non-toxic ammunition, what was being used as an argument was, well, you're going to outlaw hunting.
Oh, it's
and it's like,
I'm worried about it on the other side. I'm worried that lead's going to lead to EPA regulations to shut down bullet production. So but no, the copper rounds aren't stopping hunting. They're allowing it to continue. So that no matter how much of a nut job environmentalist they may be, it removes their arguments against hunting. Yeah. I think when you look at the trend long term, it's pretty obvious that lead is going to go away through regulation in bullets. And one thing I think that's going to be obvious is that, like, the ranges that we're using right now are going to be Superfund sites. How much lead are in the berms at the range?
I don't want to talk about it.
Shocking,
yeah.
Right? And I've always worried about Like, to me, if I had a massive anti-gun agenda, I wouldn't be going after guns. I would go after ammunition.
Oh, it'd be obvious.
And then
Yeah.
I would go after what the composition of the ammunition is, because you can show that it causes birth defects. And so it seems to me a weakness in our ability to continue to possess firearms. So it does seem to me like if you can switch to a non-toxic, it takes a lot of that off the table immediately.
I couldn't agree more. And there's other rounds that are being produced. It isn't just copper when it comes to rifle. At least for small game, 22 caliber stuff, they're even making tin rounds.
Or polymer, I've seen.
Yeah, and copper polymer blends.
Yeah, okay, right.
Yeah, and I've heard that the tin doesn't have the same precision, that ability to hit the same point over and over and over again at certain distances. I've not used it before, so I know that some folks are like, I hate these rounds. But
they're early in development.
Yeah, too. Like, no one's figured out, like, do we maybe need a different shape? Do we need to blend it with this other metal to create that precision shooting? And we'll never get there if we don't buy them, because funds the research.
We need to fund it.
Right.
Oh, it's interesting. I mean, having this conversation is good, because this has been on my mind for a while, but I've been kind of putting it off. And I just want to kind of conclude on what you were saying before about you were starting to go into, if you were starting over, some weapon selection stuff.
I mean, for me, if I could only buy one weapon.
Oh, this is an interesting one.
Yeah, and I'm going to talk about a firearm right now.
And you're speaking from the perspective of a person who does what activities? I guess
wants to get as much food as possible. Okay, as much wild
Any defensive
food.
component to this, or you're just talking about
No, solely
strictly
hunting.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm going to buy a shotgun, straight up. And I want to say, don't make the mistake that we've made. Don't go buy a cheap one.
Yeah.
And then a couple years later, you're like, oh, this is actually limiting me. Parts are breaking. I'm not going to be able. Remember, when we have firearms, these are made of metal and polymers. There's been damage done to the ecosystem somewhere to build these. So get really good ones, so we don't have to go back to industry to buy more of them.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Get ones we're handing on to our children and grandchildren. So I'm literally like, if I'm going to buy something, well, sometimes I'm like, Daniel,
Yeah.
because you might have already done the research on it, and I know
We're
that
both the same, though. Buy one for life. Right? Yeah.
One time for life. It's the most eco-conscientious thing to do when it comes to buying things.
Yeah.
So buy quality, and I'm going to buy, if I could only have one, I'm going to buy a shotgun. Now, having used it for a while, I'm all about the Benelli.
Yeah.
But, whatever shotgun you decide to
Benelli
get.
being an Italian
Yeah,
shotgun manufacturer that uses a really interesting inertia system. And there's some offshoot brands that are a little less expensive as well.
And I'm not familiar with those, but knowing that they exist, it gives people a way to get that low impact from the recoil.
Right.
If you're firing multiple times, your shotgun isn't leaving the target from the recoil of the shot, and then you've got to re-sight.
Or another thing is that we were talking about flinch response earlier, and when you're afraid of the felt recoil of your gun, you tend to anticipate the shot a lot.
And here, it just doesn't hurt. It's not the same. Right?
I told you the other day on the last hunt I went on that we shot combined, two guys, about 100 rounds of 12 gauge shotgun.
And that's a bigger gauge. I'm using a 20 gauge most of the time. So that's
but to your point, I kind of agree. If a person's budget was like, okay, I'm only going to be able to afford one gun and I needed to do everything, I would also agree a shotgun. And the question becomes a 12 or a 20 gauge, which I think you could go with either. But I shoot a 12 gauge, you shoot a 20 gauge. But normally a 12 gauge, you do feel the recoil. I shot about 50 rounds the other day through my Benelli Super Black Eagle 3, which is it's like the Ferrari of shotguns. I couldn't even press in and find a sore spot on my shoulder. Didn't even feel it.
Which is really good also for light framed people who may be intimidated by firearms. It doesn't hurt. Yeah. It absorbs the force with the system that they're using.
They're expensive though.
Yeah, but the really nice thing is now you have really tiny shot that you can use on grouse, squirrels, snowshoe hare, larger shot for ducks, and then up to geese and even swans where you can hunt those. You can shoot buckshot or even slugs for deer. And yes, when you have one weapon that you're using on everything, it might do certain birds, it's the best weapon for, right? But for deer, maybe not the best weapon, but still usable. So anytime
It's a
you're
Leatherman. I would rather have a real screwdriver when I need a real screwdriver, but in a pinch, the one on my Leatherman works.
right. I mean, let's face it, you can use a screwdriver and a hammer to twist a bolt off.
Yeah, right.
But you wanted a wrench.
Yeah, right.
But the point is sometimes we can't afford a whole toolbox.
Yep.
Get the shotgun, especially if you do buy a Benelli. What's so wonderful about it, and I'm sure
Listen to you pitching Benellis.
I know,
over
I just
here.
love them. You've converted me.
It's a good gun.
But I'm sure this is true of other platforms,
yeah.
but I really just tend to know the one that I use.
Right.
You can change barrels.
To a rifled barrel.
One that has spiraled grooves on the inside, so now your accuracy with a solid projectile increases dramatically. Now you've got a really good bear, deer, potentially even moose gun, depending on the season and how close you are. And you have non-toxic shot available all the way through. Buckshot I'm not sure about. I've never looked. But you have copper sabot slugs that you can use for shooting
all
deep.
copper, huh?
Yeah, you can do. And obviously you have all the steel shot and other non-lead metals that are being used.
You also have places where I'm thinking of a friend of mine who lives down in York, Maine.
Oh, that's perfect.
And,
perfect.
It's a shotgun-only area. You're not
For the
allowed to
reason
shoot.
it's safer.
Because a shotgun. So here's your limitation with the shotgun is range. So
Which is also the safety.
there's the safety. So if you've got a tightly packed urban or suburban, I should say, suburban environment, the nice thing about a shotgun is that a slug, which is basically, so people listening, it's like 1 ounce wad of lead.
It's large.
It's a very large single projectile that you can shoot out of a shotgun. It drops off probably starts dropping off pretty dramatically after 100 yards. I've never shot one past that, but I don't shoot with slugs too often. But it doesn't go very far compared to a
it's
rifle.
not going to go 3/4 of a mile, and hit somebody.
Correct, right? So
As
and
we've
it's
seen.
it's as we've seen happen. That was neither of us shooting. Just to be clear. So I would agree. The versatility also, like I was mentioning before, in brown bear country, 12 gauge slugs is very common for people to carry defensively. So
When these are outfitted with a nice sling, they're on my back. I'm hiking miles with them, and there's just it just fits there nicely.
I'm teaching. Oh yeah, the Benelli on your back. The Benelli's so light. Too.
Yeah.
I'm teaching in a group right now. And I just did a piece on shotguns, and I was showing my Benelli and this is true of any shotgun, but what I was showing was that I have a set of fiber optic iron sights that I put on during turkey season when I need well-aimed shots, or if I was shooting slugs. I take those sights off when I'm shooting birds on the wing. When I'm wing shooting, I take the sling off. When I'm turkey hunting, I put the sling on. So I can reconfigure that gun for a lot of jobs.
Right.
That said, agreeing with you, I would also say for the more budget-conscious person, probably a Remington 870 pump action. Because the Benellis we're talking about, we both shoot semi-automatic
You just
shotguns.
pull the trigger 3 times or whatever.
Keep shooting.
Yeah.
However, they are incredibly reliable guns, but obviously a pump action is almost like a foolproof action, right? It'd be really hard to jam that up if you know how to use it. So a Remington 870 is a really good buy. That's the same shotgun that, police and military used forever, and there are parts everywhere, very interchangeable, very fungible parts. And I believe it's what's the other one? The Mossberg, I think, is the 500.
Yes.
Very common guns. I also think when you look at big picture trends, when you step back and you look at trends, it's very obvious where it's headed with firearms legislature and control. And certain weapon systems are going to probably go away a lot sooner than others. Shotguns will be legal for a very long time.
It's going to be the last.
Well, probably be the last thing you can have. And I would recommend, I have a couple of 870s. I don't take them hunting really anymore. I'll loan them out, things like that. But I know that parts for those will be available for the rest of time.
Yep.
Whereas my Benelli's little, the parts are going to be less available. It's like having a foreign sports car or something.
Yes.
Anyway, I would agree with that. That said, I like to have a shotgun, a rifle, and a 22 is my sort of
there's no doubt.
optimum kit. But
And for me, interestingly enough, if I could only own one rifle and one rifle only, I would probably go lower caliber than most people so that I could use it on smaller things as well. But that also has, again, we're talking about using a Leatherman for everything instead of actually, using the wrong tool sometimes for the animal. If we have time, there's one other thing that I'd like to suggest to people when it comes to archery. Most people are going to use some type of pulley bow, one of the modern bows. And what I often see happen is people put all their money into the bow and then they buy inexpensive arrows.
Oh, this is true of the firearm as well.
All the weapon into the firearm and then the cheapest, crappiest...
let's come back to archery and let me just say this about firearms.
Yeah.
Really, in truth, your gun is just the bullet launcher.
Yes, right.
It's the bullet that makes contact with the animal. It's the bullet that if it's quality, impacts in relatively the same place each time, or if it's low quality, you don't trust where it's going to even impact.
Even shot from an expensive weapon, crappy rounds don't land in the same place.
I would rather shoot a crappy gun with good rounds than vice versa, even though I'm big on having ergonomically the gun that I like and all of that.
Of course.
But I often like to think, I try to blur the line between archery and firearms in my mind in the sense of the evolution of projectile weapons and just be like, okay, the firearm's just like, what's interesting about archery is it's still functional today. Like, that's so neat about it. You don't see a lot of atlatl hunting anymore, I know it exists, but it's limited. But the bow is like contemporary with the firearm, even though firearms have been around for quite a few
and still now. Being used to hunt extremely large and in some cases very dangerous game effectively.
I was thinking earlier when we were talking about sort of prehistorically how one of the advantages we have with modern archery is that you get identical arrows in almost every single way, right? Molecularly, they'll be sort of off, but they're
matched.
Perfectly straight. They're perfectly matched. The fletchings are the same. That's very hard to accomplish in making your own equipment.
Right, and fortunately, I'm not countering what you said. Fortunately, it does make a difference, but it makes less difference with the wooden bows because the projectiles are going slower. As soon as they start going 275, 300, 350 feet per second, now things have to be perfect. And that's, again, not to counter you because having perfectly matched stuff is really important. Most arrows that are these are kind of, say, the best arrows that you'll be able to purchase at a normal outfitter like LOB and Cabela's are straight to 0.003 inches per distance that they're bent over. And I forget what that distance of the arrow is over the length of that shaft. I've seen people shoot arrows that were 0.005. I mean, it sounds like no difference. And their arrows, the spread is crazy.
Oh, wow.
And in fact, even at relatively short distances.
Like spread, just for people listening, because I'm seeing with your hands, you mean point of impact
shifts
dramatically.
It's spacing out instead of all being a compact area, so the arrows are nearly hitting each other.
Sometimes they do hit each other.
That's right.
I've ruined a lot of arrows splitting them with another arrow.
Yeah. These are spaced out so that there's this much larger area, such that using them for turkey hunting, you could potentially just graze the bird.
Wow.
Okay? The arrows that I'm using are 0.001.
Wow.
You have to pay for that, and I understand.
Who makes them, NASA?
Yeah. These are the Valkyrie archery broadheads and arrows that...
That's a whole system.
That they have put together, this high-weight forward system. But they fly like nobody. When I shoot with other people, I have this advantage. Now, the thing is people want to put all their money into a bow. And again, if you're on a budget, as most of us don't have unlimited funds, don't worry about the bow. The absolute least expensive pulley bows that you can buy today, which could come from the company Diamond, $350, all set up.
Wow.
Are still casting arrows so fast that they're lethal to deer and bear, but your arrow makes way more difference. Spend all your money on your arrows. And now there'll be a lot of people saying, I've been using cheap arrows and they still work. That's right. So long as their wind isn't blowing, so long as they don't deflect on a branch, they don't hit bone, so long as you hit the spot you were going for.
If you have optimal conditions.
But if you have suboptimal conditions, you want the arrow to be amazing, just like you want the round in a firearm to be amazing.
It's so funny
the
because
platform is less important than what you're actually contacting the animal with, just as you said.
I mean, you're throwing it too. It's like you're throwing it, lobbing it over there. I find it really interesting that guns are sexy to people and bows are sexy to people, but it's not so sexy to talk about arrows and bullets as much, but they are more important. And it's kind of like, it's counterintuitive to people. And I think it's sort of like that thing, we've both experienced this, the cost of the scope that you put on your rifle, the glass, is often more than the cost of the rifle.
I have that.
I have that in many cases. So,
but that's what you're seeing the animal with,
and that's your sighting system, right?
Yeah.
So, the squirt gun is less important, right? It's actually like that's just the launcher,
right.
But what you sight it with and what the projectile is doing is what's more important. So anyway, that stuff's just counterintuitive because you assume it's the gun or it's the caliber, and it's like really it's your marksmanship and the quality of your projectile. So I didn't really know where this conversation would go today, but I found this really fascinating, man.
I hope it's helpful.
It's nice to talk about this
yeah
stuff, it's different. So thanks for swinging by and talking about this stuff today.
Yeah, that was great.
What's on your horizon? Next thing you're going to be hunting?
Good question. I mean, right now
you're fishing. Huh?
Yeah, we're fishing. And as I mentioned to you, it's kind of a slow year. We've had some successes, but we've also had some failures in places where we didn't think we were going to have successes. I mean, here in our local ecosystem, I do intend to do a little bit of snowshoe hare hunting. I have a cousin who has beagles that he runs them with.
Oh, let's talk about that.
Sure.
Because I've got an awesome population here.
Okay.
I mean, a lot of them.
Yeah. So, and obviously I'm looking forward to turkeys. That's in the spring. That's my favorite animal in the world to hunt.
It's so fun, right?
You always see the animal every day. You always have action. They're always almost close enough, even when they aren't. Yeah. And I really enjoy eating them.
Cool. I'm looking forward to doing this crow hunt. I want to show you the decoys that I got and talk about some. This is my first time, but I have some ideas of what I'll be doing. And what I'm trying to figure out right now is, can crows pick up trichinosis, where they scavenge on animals that could have them. And I've seen them mentioned in one UN report, but it wasn't real specific. I was like trying,
Understood.
So I'm really trying to understand, basically, do I need to cook this animal
all the way through,
or can I eat it rare? Because I'm going to cook some sea ducks for you today, and I'll just keep them real rare, So anyway, it's something that's coming up. But
so can I please finish up our discussion with this one thing?
Yeah.
Right now, the most important thing that I see going on that could be impacting hunting is the loss of places to hunt. Mm-hmm. And the way that we give back, not only to the lands that we hunt upon, through protecting them, not only to the next generation so they have places to hunt, is to figure out a way for us to buy land. And I don't necessarily mean just as an individual. I mean giving whatever you have available, and I'm talking about your personal money, not what goes into the taxes for firearms and bullets and all of these kind of things.
Oh, not your conservation money.
Yeah, I want people to think about, even, I don't care what the amount is, it can be very tiny, but to find a way to promote land conservation so that we always have access to land to hunt on. We're seeing it being converted to housing lots, roads, buildings, and so forth. We're losing it to private property owners who sometimes, not always, but frequently we see this with private property owners who have just recently purchased property who came from other states and have no connection to that land, no history understanding of that land. And I can't tell you how many childhood places that I used to hunt, woodcock, wood ducks, and ruffed grouse, I can no longer hunt on. Mm-hmm. And so be thinking about that. Don't just complain about the loss of land. You can pool your money together with thousands of other people, and that little bit of money can become something that you can actually buy land with. I feel like I'm maybe not giving the best presentation here, but it's the land upon which to hunt, to fish, to gather foods. Without it, all of this dies.
Well, you want to tell people how they can learn more about your land project? And
I mean, we certainly have one at Wilder Waters where we're trying to buy thousands of acres of forest to prevent this very thing from happening. And that's at, Wilder Waters community, which you can find online, where we're trying to do that for our local area. And there are going to be hunters that maybe live in places that are very suburban or urban, and buying lands in their close vicinity isn't possible. So give so other people can do it.
Oh, that's interesting.
But if you have lands around you, figure out how to get involved in local land trusts and stuff so that you can be buying land, and making sure that you're in discussion so it doesn't just become, we bought the land, but you can't hunt on it. Mm-hmm. You can be part of we need the interaction of human and wildlife to continue.
Cool. Where else do people find you? And also, let's plug your courses, because I think you teach some of the best foraging classes that exist.
Thanks, Daniel. I'm at arthurhaines.com. Easy to find.
And you guys are at Wilder Waters Community on Instagram.
The community is on Instagram. I'm on Facebook as an individual, but all of it's really...
Is your Ancestral Plants group full, or is there...
It's just... You can keep joining.
Okay, so tell people about that too, because you've run that for a long time.
There's a group on Facebook called Ancestral Plants. Just the name is to signify this long connection to plants as a vital part of our diets and medicine and clothing for a long time. And you can join that. It's a private group. You just send in a request and you can join it. And essentially, all of your identification questions, your questions about how do I process this? Can I make this edible? How do I turn this into medicine? Those kinds of questions can all be answered there for free. What we've done at Wilder Waters Community is we've set up an apprenticeship program it's a take on the guiding that we were talking about, where you can find a mentor for hunting, fishing, foraging. And even beyond food, we would be doing, obviously, like tanning hides and making medicine and natural history tracking.
This leans on the more primitive side that your just general approach does. So this isn't a place where this isn't like a lot of outfitters where you'd show up and it's all
gadget
gear focused and country music. It's like you guys have a different approach.
And certainly if we're in hunting season and people want to learn how to use shotguns, we're going to do that. Right. It's not a requirement, but it's a primitive lean for sure. So that we're looking to do as deep a dive into the local
traditional would be a way to say it too.
As deep a dive into the local ecology as we can for the season that they're there for. So they get a chance to just see what it is we're doing and learn it all, so they don't have to just bumble through it for however long it takes, as when we just try to do it
on our own.
Yeah.
Lastly, your events.
Yes.
This is where I learned to forage, so I'm always big on plugging these whenever you come on, because I just think, I know they fill up pretty fast, but I think they're just really good courses.
Just put one of them up, and I'm trying to arrange for some others going on right now. But I obviously do foraging lectures, and I like the weekend-long classes that you're talking about. We do them out of our house. People come for a weekend, and we go to some of the most spectacular places. I mean, you know the spots. You've been going to them for years. It's a wild food Eden. Mm-hmm. And we again do another deep dive into foraging, where we're trying to get rid of the obstacles so that people are learning plant taxonomy. That's the identification piece, the ecology, the phenology, again, what habitats they grow in and when to gather them respectively, how we process them, turn them into food, but equally as important, what is the conscientious collection method for this species? And sometimes they overlap, and sometimes they're completely different.
Well, I just want to say that those classes are really good. Thanks for all the ones that I've got to learn in. Thanks for making the time for us today, man. This is a really cool conversation.
Couldn't appreciate the invitation more.
All right, talk soon.
Thanks for listening to the WildFed podcast. You can help us grow this show by subscribing and leaving us a rating and review. It ensures better rankings and more advertiser interest, which translates directly into better shows, more awesome guests, and a constant stream of fresh, new content. Have a question you'd like answered on the show, or a hunting, fishing, or foraging trip you'd like to host us on? Email us at info@wild-fed.com. And be sure to visit our website, wild-fed.com, to check out the WildFed video show and store. WildFed. Food is all around you.